We'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 6 o'clock on Saturday, the 17th of February. Today.
Mistake. Putin is responsible for Navalny's death. Putin is responsible.
Vladimir Putin must pay. World leaders speak out against the Russian regime following the death of opposition leader Alexei Navalny.
Letitia James, that's another case altogether. She's a horribly corrupt attorney general, and it's all having to do with election interference.
And no one is above the law. A New York court orders Donald Trump to pay around £280 million in his civil fraud trial with former president, describing it as a witch hunt.
Prince Harry reportedly willing to take on a temporary royal role amid his father's cancer diagnosis.
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is under pressure from his party to turn the Tories' fortunes around following a double by-election defeat.
More than 800 potential army recruits were banned from signing up because of their tattoos amid a shortage of soldiers. We'll debate that later on.
And in sports, sad news from the world of cycling. A six-time Olympic champion Chris Hoy reveals his cancer diagnosis. Meanwhile, in the cricket, England's Ben Duckett has led the charge for the tourists in India. And we look ahead to a big day of Premier League action.
Good morning. There's a mixed picture out there for many of us this weekend. Some heavy rain to come, but also some spring-like sunshine. Find out all the details with me a little later on.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Dawn Neeson. And this is Breakfast on GB News.
Here's one I found in the papers this morning, Dawn.
I dread to think, Stephen.
Which TV screen character would you most like to share a house with?
Ooh. You know what? I don't... Actually...
It's a very odd list.
Go on.
Well, number one is not that odd. It's Rachel Green from Friends. So that's Jennifer Aniston.
No, the hair thing. The hair thing would drive me nuts.
So I can understand that. But number two is Del Boy. Wouldn't that drive you out? Number three, Mr. Bean.
No. I was thinking Peggy Mitchell from EastEnders.
Oh, really?
We'd get on like an house on fire.
Oh, you'd scream and shout at each other.
Yeah, that's the point.
Oh, no.
It's just like being at home already.
Oh.
Morning, darling.
Yeah, I'd like to have it all nice and calm. It's a very odd list. Very odd list.
You're not moving in with me then, obviously.
Oh, no, I like peace and quiet. I don't do shouty. Don't do shouty. It's all about tranquility. Anyway, look, we've got lots to cover for you this morning. We'll bring the latest on Alexei Navalny and, of course, the accusations flying following his death yesterday. But we're just going to start with the news that a judge has ruled that the former US President Donald Trump must pay nearly $355 million to New York State for lying about the values of his properties.
He was banned from serving as a company director or taking out loans from banks in the state for 3 years. This is what Trump had to say after the ruling.
He ruled against me before he even got the case. He ruled against me, said I was guilty. He didn't know what I was guilty of before he even got the case. And Letitia James, that's another case altogether. She's a horribly corrupt attorney general, and it's all having to do with election interference.
Well, let's talk to Professor of History at the US Army War College, Ronald Granieri. Good to see you this morning, Ronald. What do you make of all of this? Because whereas it is clearly important, it just feels like yet another case that he comes out and says it's all nonsense. Who are we to believe in all of this?
Well, we do run into this difficult question, right? Is we don't have many other experiences with someone running for president who is subject to these kinds of subject to these kinds of legal problems. He's within his rights to say that he's not guilty, but he also valued Mar-a-Lago to be worth more than Buckingham Palace in order to secure loans. So the question is, what sorts of things has he violated the statutes by inflating the values, and what this all means going forward. It's so unusual, as are so many other things with him, and we run into this problem. And people say it's unprecedented. We've never done this to a presidential candidate. Well, a presidential candidate has never been as deeply involved in such questionable business deals either.
So what happens if he can't pay?
That's a good question. What happens if he can't pay? My understanding, and I'm a historian, and I will say that my opinions are my own and not those of the Army War College or the U.S. Army. But if he is responsible he can of course appeal the amounts. But in order to make the appeal, he has to put up a bond for the equivalent value, which has to be kept in escrow. So basically, he'll have to find someone to front him. If he doesn't have the money, have someone to front him at least until he can go through his appeals to see what the final amounts he has to pay would be.
Which is the interesting thing, isn't it? Because I think he's got 30 days to lodge an appeal in all of this. And he's obviously very, very likely to do that. And so we're going to end up with a lot of these court cases that are going to carry on. They're going to be in escrow themselves, if you like, all these court cases, for months, possibly years. So it could all, in effect, it could disappear, couldn't it, or fail to reach a final conclusion before the election?
Some of these cases certainly could. This one in New York State is complicated because it's a state and not a federal case, and it's a civil, not a criminal trial. But some of the other cases that are federal, basically a President Trump could order the Justice Department to simply drop them. Which is also an unusual situation to be in. The long-term question about how he deals with New York, that even as president, he would have a hard time getting out from underneath this, unless he succeeds on his legal appeals.
Ronald, this obviously is a civil case, but he has got 1 or 2 criminal cases coming up. So there's, 4 or 5 more cases coming up altogether?
I believe it's 4. I'm trying to keep track, but there's the question of the classified documents that's down in Florida. There's the question of the election interference in Fulton County, Georgia, around Atlanta. There's the question of the January 6th insurrection hearings in Washington D.C. And then there was this as well. So. Yeah, it's a lot. And
but isn't there also in this still a US Supreme Court ruling to be made on presidential immunity?
Yes, and that of course hangs over it all as well. As while a federal appeals court has rejected his claim of immunity, and this is especially with regard to the January 6th case, the question of whether the things that he said or did in and around January 6th, were they part of his official duties as president, and if so, does that mean he's immune from prosecution? The federal appeals court says he's not immune, but it will be or has been appealed to the Supreme Court, and so the Supreme Court is eventually going to have to rule on that question. And then depending on where that goes, that would then let us know what we could expect from the other trials. But this is the kind of thing, right? As of as a historian, I like to think about how complicated the past was. It's the tough part of being a historian of contemporary events is, right, they keep making more history every day. And in this case, right, the history seems to get even more complicated. And so we will eventually have to figure out what this all means.
Yeah, it's a mess. Ronald Granieri, good to see you. Thanks very much indeed. I just don't know what to make of it all. I'm so utterly confused.
You know what, Stephen? Despite everything that happens to Trump, he gets more popular.
Yeah.
The more court cases he has, the more popular he gets.
Yeah.
It's mad.
It's extraordinary.
You know what?
But is he a victim of political persecution? What I was thinking, actually, on the drive down this morning was either he's in the wrong and he just tries to bluff his way out of it, or the entire judiciary in the United States is so politicised that it just doesn't work at all.
It's just out to get him.
So which is it? I mean, I wouldn't like to say.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Probably a bit of both, to be honest with you. But the one good thing is it's so bonkers in America, it makes our politics look vaguely sane.
Yes.
I said vaguely, come on.
Positively vanilla.
Yes.
In comparison.
Sometimes that's not bad, is it,
It's
vanilla,
not bad,
darling?
no. Now, to Russia. Putin must pay. Well, that's what leaders from around the world have said as they reacted to the news that the Russian opposition leader, Alexei Navalny, has died in prison.
Reports of his death, if they're true, and I have no reason to believe they're not, Russian authorities are going to tell their own story. But make no mistake, Putin is responsible for Navalny's death. Putin is responsible.
Navalny was serving a 19-year prison sentence after being convicted of extremism and fraud following his vocal opposition to Vladimir Putin's regime.
Well, the prison service said Navalny collapsed and lost consciousness during a walk. His widow, Yulia, has pleaded with the world to punish Putin.
I want to call on the entire world community, everyone in this room and people around the world, that we come together to unite and defeat this evil, defeat the horrific regime that is now in Russia.
Right, OK, let's go to our security editor, Mark White, who has the full story on this.
By far Vladimir Putin's most high-profile political opponent, Alexei Navalny remained defiant to the last, an outspoken critic of the Kremlin who refused to remain silent even after his conviction on criminal charges, which his supporters say were politically motivated. And now those same supporters say Putin's regime is the prime suspect in the unexplained death of the opposition politician. Friends, family and his legal team suggested he may have been the victim of poisoning, a deliberate attempt by Russian authorities to silence him. The government in Moscow has dismissed any such suggestion. But for Navalny, it wouldn't be the first time he'd fallen victim to a poisoning attempt. In the summer of 2020, he fell violently ill aboard a passenger plane while on a trip to Siberia. He was flown to Germany and treated by doctors there, who concluded he'd been poisoned by Novichok. The same nerve agent was used against former Russian spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia in Salisbury in 2018. The Kremlin stands accused of regularly using poison as a means of targeting outspoken critics of the regime or perceived traitors to the Russian state. In 2006, in one of the most high-profile incidents, Kremlin critic Alexander Litvinenko was poisoned with the radioactive isotope polonium-210. He suffered an agonising few days before dying in a central London hospital.
A new opposition is appearing. It is being generated now. And Navalny played an important role in it. But at the same time, this opposition requires new ideology.
The death of Alexei Navalny means Vladimir Putin now rules virtually unchallenged. Many of the critical voices who once spoke out against the Russian leader, now jailed, forced into exile, or like Navalny, are dead. By the time he launched his full-scale invasion of Ukraine, many opponents who once tried to hold the Putin government to account have been silenced. There is widespread and understandable concern at the news of Alexei Navalny's death. But getting proper answers about the cause of death will be next to impossible. Like so many similar incidents in the past, the Kremlin will simply insist any allegations of foul play are far-fetched. Mark White, GB News.
Well, look, you will have heard Mark talk about Alexander Litvinenko there. We're going to be talking to his widow, Marina, about all of this a little bit later on in the programme.
Yeah, because one of the most moving things about this is that the Valentine's message he sent his wife just before he was, well, found dead in prison. Heartbreaking stuff. Right, let's have a look at some of the other stories coming into the newsroom this morning.
Well, the former cyclist Chris Hoy revealed that he was diagnosed with cancer last year despite having no symptoms. He's undergoing chemotherapy. The Olympic gold cyclist says the treatment is going really well.
Good for that. And under new government plans, foreign dentists could be allowed to work in the UK without a qualification check. Ministers plan to scrap the overseas entrance exam in a bid to solve the dental crisis. Critics fear this could move and lead to substandard care.
The BBC says it's been alerted to anti-Semitic behaviour by some staff. In a note sent by the Director-General, Tim Davie, it said there is no place at the BBC for racist abuse of any kind. It follows multiple complaints about the BBC's reporting on the Israel-Hamas war. Now, Prince Harry is reportedly willing to take on a temporary royal role as his father undergoes treatment for cancer.
This comes as the Duke of Sussex spoke publicly about the King's diagnosis.
He was talking to ABC News in the United States. He said the sad news had brought the family together.
How did you get the news that the King was ill?
I spoke to him.
And what did you do next?
I jumped on a plane and went to go and see him as soon as I could.
How was that visit for you emotionally?
Look, I love my family. The fact that I was able to get on a plane and go and see him and spend any time with him, I'm grateful for that.
An illness in the family can have a galvanizing or sort of reunifying effect for a family.
Absolutely.
Is that possible in this case?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, throughout all these families, I see it on a day-to-day basis. The strength of the family unit coming together.
Yeah, I think that's quite interesting, really. I mean, you were a bit worried he was going to go into way too much detail.
This is the thing, isn't it? Wasn't it? I mean, you know, talking about your dad, fair enough, I guess. I mean, he's had several books and films about it already, so why wouldn't he? But revealing the medical diagnosis is a different matter.
No, bringing the family together, though, I mean...
Oh, well, that would be lovely.
That would be nice. Well, anyway, our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, has more analysis.
So this week for Harry and Meghan has all been about perhaps trying to rebrand themselves. They've had the new glossy website, this controversial royal crest, and critics of them would say they're capitalising on their Sussex royal title. They did make an agreement with Buckingham Palace and the late Queen that they would not use the word royal. They didn't agree on the word Sussex. So it was such a surprise yesterday when we discovered that Prince Harry had done an interview with Good Morning America in the United States, and it was teased up as talking about King Charles's health. Alarm bells started ringing in my head. Presumably they started also ringing in the heads of various courtiers and members of the royal family as well. But Prince Harry refused to be drawn on private details about King Charles's health when he was asked about it. So he did confirm that he spoke to the King, and that's how he discovered he had been diagnosed with cancer. He also said he was grateful to be able to travel to the United Kingdom to spend time with his father, but he did stop short of offering up to the media any private details about the King's health, which would be a welcome relief to Buckingham Palace and a far cry away from previous interviews he's given when he's been promoting his memoir Spare, and indeed during that controversial Netflix series documenting Megxit, their stepping back as working members of the royal family, where they did reveal lots and lots of private details. So clearly there is a bit of a difference with this one. The whole interview was done to promote, or Prince Harry wanted it to promote the Invictus Games, the games he set up in 2014, championing the recovery of wounded veterans across the world. Next year, it's going to be held in Whistler, Canada. 550 or so competitors. It's the one-year countdown at the moment in Whistler, which is why Prince Harry did this interview. But another topic he touched on was his US visa or citizenship situation. He hinted, or he said he had considered becoming a United States citizen.
Do you feel American?
Do I feel American? No, I don't know. I don't know how I feel.
Would you think about becoming a citizen?
I have considered it. Yeah.
Yeah. What would stop you from doing it?
I have no idea. I'm here standing next to this with these guys. And the American citizenship is a thought that has crossed my mind, but certainly not something that's a high priority for me right now.
He also said, although he's clearly got a new family in the United States with Meghan and Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet, their two children, he says when he is in the UK, he is still wanting to speak to and see members of his family, i.e. the King, maybe Prince William, although they're not on speaking terms at the moment, so I think that's a long time to come. But there are hints of reconciliation down the path.
Right, OK, well, let's dig further into this one. Joining us now is former butler to King Charles, Grant Harold. Good morning, Grant. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Morning.
Grant, what do you make of what Harry's been saying out there?
Do you know, Don, I think there's different in my head, there's different things kind of going on. One part of me understands that it's obviously the son of the King, and at the end of the day, the King is obviously unwell and he wants to show his support, which is fantastic. But as you've mentioned earlier, because of everything else that's happened, I think people are obviously kind of thinking, is there alternative motives to it? I would like to think, I think you both know, I've always kind of been slightly on his side. I completely disagree with a lot of what he's done, but I am slightly on his side because I got on really well with him when I worked for the household. And I kind of like to think that, there is genuine reasons for it. I would hope and I would like to think there's genuine reasons for it. But at the same time, like everybody else, I'm also thinking that with these conversations, are they going to keep becoming public knowledge? But I think what he said, from what I've seen, what he has said, is not, again, as you mentioned earlier on, it's not unusual because he's obviously talking about his father. He's just sharing just a little bit of information about it. And obviously he was grateful to go over there. But it's interesting that he's obviously described the way that he loves his family, which is fantastic. And wanting to heal this rift is fantastic, which is brilliant. But is it not that thing where actions speak louder than words?
Well, yeah, that's a valid point. What about this idea, and it's being quoted this morning, saying he'd be willing to take on a temporary royal role to help fill in for the King while he's out of the picture. That seems very odd, because actually you can't imagine that going down very well at all, certainly if he was doing anything here in the UK.
This is the problem, isn't it? I genuinely understand where he's come from, because, look, again, his father's unwell. He wants probably to do something to support him, and I don't doubt that. But a lot of people in this country were thinking, again, this is an alternative motive. I don't think that. I genuinely think, I know. The thing is, I understand what's all happened, and I don't agree with it. But when I worked for the family, I know how much his father meant to him. So I know that deep down, he adores his father. I don't understand why this has all happened, but I know he adores him. So I totally believe that he wants to support him. But as you said, people are not really going to want that. And I think this is where the problem is. And if anything, the thing that the royal family might be worried about is it could cause damage. That's the reality of this. It could make people question why he's been allowed to kind of help or do things. And that's where it becomes really, really complicated.
OK.
Grant, just very, very quickly, run out of time. What do you make of him saying he had considered becoming an American citizen? Do you think his family are going to be upset by that?
I would have thought so, because at the end of the day, he's, the son of the King. He was, or still is, even though he's not a working member of the royal family, he's a senior member of the royal family. He's a Brit, and suddenly he's going to give up. Well, I say give up. He wants to become an American citizen. Look, I've got nothing wrong with that. I think, I love the States. I've got many friends over there. But at the end of the day, you kind of think, well, his kind of loyalty belongs in this country to the crown, to his family, and to the country. And that's where it feels a little bit sad that he, again, it's almost like he wants to turn his back on it. And that I really don't understand.
OK. Grant, good to see you this morning. Thanks very much.
Likewise, thank you.
Do let us know what you think about that. gbviews@gbnews.com. But let's see what the weather's going to do for you today. Here's Annie.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. There will be some heavy rain through this afternoon and the evening, but there will also be some drier spells this weekend, and it is staying very mild. So it is a mild start out there. There is some mist and fog across eastern areas. That should lift and clear to leave some sunshine across eastern areas, particularly through today. They should stay largely dry through much of the morning and into the afternoon here as well. However, across the west, we'll see drizzly rain, particularly across the coasts and the hills, and then some quite heavy rain arriving later on into parts of Northern Ireland and parts of West Wales and Western Scotland as well. But it will be feeling very mild once again, particularly in any of the sunshine in the east. As that band of very heavy rain pushes eastwards, we will see some disruption to travel, some difficult driving conditions. So there is a weather warning in force for many areas of England and Wales, and that will push into the southeast by Sunday morning, leaving a much drier start behind it elsewhere in the country. However, there is some uncertainty with how quickly this rain will clear, so I would prepare for a bit of rain in the south and east to start on Sunday. Elsewhere, though, it will be a much drier picture by the morning, away from some heavier showers floating around across northern Scotland. So many areas will see sunny spells through the course of Sunday, fairly light winds as well, so it will feel very pleasant in the sunshine. Still very mild air with us, so temperatures will be climbing to around 15 or 16 degrees in the south, which is very high for the time of year.
Quite possibly spring-like.
Oh, let's hope so.
And here's something else that puts spring in your step. Make sure you don't miss out on your chance to win £18,000 cash in our Great British Giveaway. Here's all the details you need to enter.
There's still time to become the winner of our Great British Giveaway. There's an incredible £18,000 in cash to be won. Totally tax-free cash that you could do whatever you like with. That's like having an extra £1,500 in your bank account each month for a whole year. It could go towards your mortgage or rent, buy monthly treats, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. For another chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 23rd of February. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Good luck.
Now, still to come for you this morning, fallout from the by-election results continues. We'll get all the latest analysis in just a couple of minutes.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yeah.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, you know, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, you know, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Welcome back. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says people are now ready to put their faith in a changed Labour Party following his party's double win in Wellingborough and Kingswood by-elections.
Well, the Prime Minister says the circumstances facing his party are challenging, but insists Labour doesn't have a plan.
Midterm by-elections are always difficult for incumbent governments, and the circumstances of these by-elections were, of course, particularly challenging. Now, I think if you look at the results, very low turnout, and it shows that we've got work to do to show people that we are delivering on their priorities, and that's what I'm absolutely determined to do, but also shows that there isn't a huge amount of enthusiasm for the alternative in Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, and that's because they don't have a plan. And if you don't have a plan, you can't deliver real change. And when the general election comes, that's the message I'll be making to the country. Stick with our plan, because it is starting to deliver the change that the country wants and needs.
I love the terminology, challenging. That's one way of putting it.
Well,
it's like, it's quite challenging.
Yeah, just a little bit.
A bit like working with you, to be honest with you.
Well, yes, I can understand that. Let's talk to political commentator Peter Spencer. Morning to you, Peter. In some respects, the PM makes some valid points there, doesn't he, when he talks about Labour not having a plan. I'm sure they do, but they certainly haven't shared it.
No, and they're very wise not to, because apart from anything else, they can't be quite sure what the state of the economy will be when the election is called. They also are quite determined not to say or do anything which will frighten the horses. I mean, I take your point, both of you, about the challenging situation facing the Conservatives. I guess it would be fair and true to say that when people were sitting on the poop deck of the Titanic, they also, when it was about to sink, they also found the situation pretty challenging. But I do have to say that I think that these two by-elections represent one significant step closer for Keir Starmer to getting his feet under the table in number 10 Downing Street. And I'm going to quote here a line from Jim Callaghan when he grimly foretold his party's, the Labour Party's, defenestration at the hands of Margaret Thatcher. And what he said was, there are times when there is a sea change in politics. It then does not matter what we say or do. The public has shifted in what it wants and what it approves of. And I think that's pretty much where we're at right now.
Peter, I don't know about you, but the one thing I want to do, what I want our political parties to do at the moment, is to actually fight, to actually show some gumption. And in this by-election, I didn't get that from the Tories. They barely seemed bothered. Both candidates kept a very low profile during the campaign. There was no fight involved. So, you know, they are facing a challenge, but they don't seem to be that willing to overcome it.
No, I suspect that that's because they knew they had already lost. I mean, there was a flicker of hope in Conservative circles in the run-up to these by-elections because of the fact that Starmer had had a pretty beastly week. Remember the problem with his with the Labour Party's choice of candidate for the forthcoming Rochdale by-election. Remember that Mr. Ali came out with a crackpot anti-Israeli conspiracy theory, and the Labour Party thought, oh, what do we do about this? And first of all, they were saying, we stand by our man, we stand by our man, we stand by our man. When I say we stand by our man, what I mean is we don't stand by our man. And they all look rather silly. And of course, the Tory party conflated that with Keir Starmer saying we're going to spend billions and billions on green measures, billions and billions. When I say we're going to spend billions and billions, what I mean is we're not going to spend billions and billions on green measures. So they were very happy to say, oh, look, Starmer, you can't trust him, he's a jellyfish or whatever. But in the event, one of those by-elections, we note there was the biggest swing for decades and decades and decades away from the Conservatives towards the Labour Party.
OK, Peter, for now, thanks very much indeed.
Right, OK. Should we talk football?
I think we better
Well, it's not just football, it's other sport. It's just that I do football, OK?
You like football, don't you?
Aidan McGee does other sport.
He does. Actually, there's some very sad news about Chris Hoy.
Yeah, there was an announcement yesterday. We haven't heard from him in a little while. He announced that he had been diagnosed with cancer last year. He's 47 years old, a six-time Olympic champion. He didn't specify the type of cancer, and rather disturbingly, he said that he was actually forced into the announcement. I mean, here's the quote here, actually. It's really got me. He said, "For the sake of my young family, I hope to keep this information private, but regrettably, our hand has been forced. While I'm thankful for any support, I'd like to deal with this privately." So it seems as if someone was almost on the verge of breaking the story against his will, and he's had to kind of jump the gun and reveal the diagnosis. As I say, he hasn't indicated what type of cancer it is, but he said that he's surrounded by love and support, and he's very optimistic, and he's still riding his bike. And I mean, look, the list of achievements is almost never-ending. I mean, he won medals across 4 different Olympics: 1 silver medal at Sydney, 1 gold at Athens, 3 golds at Beijing, 2 golds at London 2012, probably most famously because it was the most recently, but the most successful track cyclist of all time as well. And he has a young family, as we mentioned, so very distressing, and we wish him all the very best in his recovery.
I mean, his fitness, absolutely. His fitness will obviously go somewhere, but I mean, he's started chemo already, so
yes,
fingers crossed it all goes.
It's a long run. It'll be a long run, but I suppose I don't know if he'll reveal further down the line what type of cancer it was. But at the moment, it's only speculation as to the prognosis.
Well, let's hope.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope he keeps it to himself.
Yeah,
if that's
exactly
what he wants to do.
You know what? I'm just going to play devil's advocate slightly on that, because I think we've heard it with King Charles recently, by talking out about cancer, it does encourage people. Yeah, I know it wasn't prostate cancer in his case, but it does encourage people to go and get checked.
It does.
More of an increase, a 50% increase on people looking at various cancers on websites. I'm just saying, please go and get checked if you're worried about anything.
Oh, no, absolutely. But I just think there's clearly been an invasion of his privacy here.
Yeah, I'm curious about that, because no newspaper would publish details of his personal medical history and his personal medical details. You just don't do that sort of thing. So I'm curious about what's happening.
Someone's contacted him somewhere and said, give us an interview or we'll...
Yeah, all we can do is wish him and the family well.
Just the statement on Instagram, by the way, just to close it off on a more positive note, he said it's an exciting year of work for him ahead, not least with the Paris Olympics in July. I can't wait to get stuck in, have fun and share it with it all. So it's good that he's in an upbeat mood.
Exactly.
Get it's an Olympic year.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually. Now, what's Ange Postecoglou been saying?
Well, this is interesting because the Asian Cup happened last week and one of his star performers at Tottenham, Heung-min Son, was playing for South Korea. Now, nobody seems to know why he turned up to England, back to England last week with 2 of his fingers taped up. Now, what was happening was that it's emerged this week out of, I think it was leaked in England via the South Korean FA. So that's a bit peculiar in itself. But he was unhappy because they were having dinner before the game with his teammates. This is against Jordan in Qatar, for the Asian Cup semi-final. They were expected to win this. They were the favourites. He's 31 years old. It's probably his last chance to get his hand on the trophy. It's very prestigious in that part of the world. And he was disappointed that some of his teammates left dinner early to go and play table tennis. He then got into an altercation. We don't know the nature of the argument, or it sounds like a few fisticuffs. But he's been left with two dislocated fingers. He did play for Tottenham last week. He came off the bench, so it's nothing serious. But Ange Postecoglou was asked about it yesterday, and he came out fighting for his man. He said sometimes people are mistaken about Sonny because he's such a positive guy who, whenever you see him smiling, everyone has real affection for him, but he wants to win. He doesn't like standard slipping, and I've seen him do it around here. If something's not right, he will say it. So he's defending his man, because there's lots of intrigue. When it's an international tournament like this as well, the story goes around the world, and you think to yourself, well, what on earth has happened to involve that's meant a player has dislocated his finger and jeopardises his country's chances of winning the trophy, which, of course, they lost quite comfortably in the end to Qatar, which is quite an embarrassing result. They're 64 places below South Korea in the world rankings, but he's expected to be fit today. They play Wolves in the Premier League, big game for them, and some brilliant games as well elsewhere in the Premier League. Big fixture programme today as well. 8 matches, very rare in the Premier League these days. West Ham in action, need a win, don't they, Dawn?
We do, absolutely. Yeah, we certainly do. Thanks for mentioning that, Aidan. Yeah.
Brentford, Liverpool at 12:30. Man City against Chelsea at 5:30 this evening as well. So that's probably the key fixture of the day. But it's very rare in the TV era that we would get 7 matches on a Saturday. It's normally spread out over the
Yeah, and 3 o'clock kickoff. Whatever happened to 3 o'clock kickoff on a Saturday? Sorry, old school.
I know.
Have we got time for a bit of cricket?
Yeah, just
the
quick.
latest.
Absolutely. They're at lunch at the minute. So England have reached 290 for 5, trailing India by 155 with 5 wickets remaining. India 445 all out. Ben Duckett was outstanding, 153 knock. All depends on Ben Stokes now. England have left themselves in a little bit of a difficult position.
Yeah. OK, Aidan, we'll catch up with you for the latest a
Thank you.
bit later on. We've got the papers heading away in just a couple of minutes, so don't go anywhere.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
Former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has made her much-anticipated appearance before the Scottish COVID inquiry today. It comes after allegations emerged that she deleted key pandemic WhatsApp messages, used the pandemic to push her own political agenda. But let's just cast our mind back, shall we, to August 2021, when Sturgeon was asked if she'd hand over all her WhatsApps to the inquiry. Here we go.
I think if you understand statutory public inquiries, you would know that even if I wasn't prepared to give that assurance, which for the avoidance of doubt I am, then I wouldn't have the ability. This will be a judge-led statutory public inquiry.
Which, for the avoidance of doubt, I am. OK. Well, you weren't, were you? But fast forward to today, and she was much less forthcoming.
WhatsApp messages between yourself and Mr. Youssef and Ms. Lloyd were produced by you. Where did you get them?
They were provided to me through the Scottish Government.
But did you delete them?
Yes.
Did you consider yourself, against that background and your considerable ministerial experience, to be precisely the right First Minister for the job?
No, that's not how I would have thought of it at all. There's a large part of me wishes that I hadn't been.
All right, then. I'm joined now by Tory MP Lee Anderson. Lee, are those just crocodile tears?
Well, it looks like crocodile tears to me, Patrick. I mean, first we had the missing camper van. Nobody knows where that is. Now we've got this nonsense. We've got these burner phones, dodgy £5 phones from wherever they bought them from, WhatsApp messages going missing. It all looks a little bit dodgy to me. I mean, she's bleating on there, she's crying on screen. This is not cutting no ice. You know, it's crocodile tears. It makes you wonder what the SNPs are all about, Patrick. It looks... I mean, the people that have burner phones, let's be clear, people that have these dodgy phones where you can't trace them and disappearing WhatsApp messages, these are normally criminals, these are drug dealers, and you know what? These SNPs are no better than criminals.
Welcome back to GB News Breakfast with Stephen and Dawn. Time to go through the newspapers.
Yes, let's.
Yes.
The Telegraph has world leaders blaming Putin for the death of opposition leader Alexei Navalny.
Meanwhile, The Guardian expresses a global outrage over Alexei Navalny's death as Putin is blamed.
The Express says Navalny's widow is calling on world leaders to bring down Putin's regime.
Meanwhile, The Times says that Prince Harry might return to a temporary royal role to support his father during his illness.
And The Sun says Prince Harry considers becoming an American citizen, which means he'd have to give up his royal title.
Now, joining us to go through what's making you news, we have a great panel for you. Columnist and parliamentary sketch writer Madeline Grant and showbiz supremo Stephanie Tecci.
Good morning.
Morning, both of you. Thank you for coming in on a brilliant Saturday morning. Lovely to have you both. OK, Stephen, you're in charge. What paper would you like to start?
Mail, Madeline. Mail. Let's talk about Navalny, should we?
Yes, absolutely. Tragic news. The Mail leads with the story that Navalny's widow spoke publicly at the Munich Security Conference, calling on the world to avenge her husband's death and speaking out very publicly about that. And it's actually quite unusual from her because although she's been a great supporter of her husband throughout his life and through his various spells in prison and then in a penal colony in Siberia. She doesn't normally get involved so openly in taking to the podium in this way. And to manage to do that just hours after hearing of the death of your husband, the murder of your husband, just extraordinary bravery.
She didn't confirm it, actually. She didn't want to confirm about the death for some reason.
But interesting that you say murder.
Yes.
Now, I mean, the problem with this is, I mean, obviously, lots of accusations are being made, but we haven't got any facts, and the problem is we're not going to get them.
No, of course we're not. But I think there were videos of him. There was a video of him just the day before he died, shall we say, in which he looked perfectly healthy. Given Putin's track record in terms of what happens to those who oppose him, what has happened to dissidents in the past, what happens to many of his leading generals if they stand too close to a window, etc. I think the balance of probability would suggest that this was murder.
What would be the benefit of killing him, though?
I think a way of showing any kind of opposition that there is no hope. I mean, Navalny is his most high-profile critic and the leader of the kind of unofficial opposition against him. I think, you know, with an election coming up soon, it's probably a way of saying, you know, this is what happens to you, to try and quash hope in others that might try to oppose him.
I think this is going to backfire on Putin, though, because Navalny, he did a video, a previous video, where he says, if they kill me, it's because we're getting stronger. And now this has put this on the world's map. And again, the West is coming together to unite against this common enemy, which is Putin. And it's going to attack him more and more mentally for Putin, where the fact, how many more people can he kill? How many more times can he get away with this, you know? And I think by killing such a strong opponent like this, he's actually going to breed more people who are going to come against him.
The problem we've got is, what do we do? What are we meant to do with this? It's on the front page of every single newspaper today. It's wall-to-wall on the news broadcasts, and everyone's going, this is awful, this is awful. But what are we meant to do in the West?
What are the options, Madeleine?
Support Ukraine, I think, is the best option.
Will this have any impact in the States, then, where obviously this $60 billion, is it, dollar plan or whatever it is, this huge plan is still sort of stalled in Congress?
Yeah, well, I think it will certainly be... It comes at uncomfortable timing, certainly for many of the Putin apologists in the Republican camp, and just days after that astonishing interview with Tucker Carlson. I think it will make a few people hopefully hang their heads in shame a little bit about how relaxed they have been about Putin and what he stands for. But no, in terms of what this does overall, I really don't know. I think that there is a very strong... And actually, I have some sympathy for it. America has been bankrolling European security for a long time. So, you know, they're not entirely without grievance when it comes to not wishing to get involved. But I think within the Republican camp, some of this has got into, you know, outright crankery and conspiracy theories.
Putin. Now, I'm quite intrigued by the, you know, Putin will pay angle, though, from the White House at the moment, because it's an interesting sentiment, but what does it actually mean?
Yeah, it's true, and we've been saying this for many years.
Well, Putin came out and said that. Biden came out and said that even, Dawn, in 2021. And I just think, I mean, is there the appetite in this country to continue funding the Ukraine when we are feeling the pinch ourselves at home?
Oh, don't even talk about that.
Well, yeah, no, it'd be interesting to know what you think, actually, about that one. But I don't know, can we just let him carry... I mean, this is what we always say when you look back at the history books, isn't it? They say, we wish you'd done something early. You can't just leave someone to carry on.
And in the Middle East, we have a good example of what happens when an aggressive country is allowed to continue acting aggressively in what's happened to Iran. You know, they thought that by lifting sanctions on Iran that it would be contained, and the exact opposite has happened. You know, sometimes you do have to deal with an aggressor in the only way that they know.
The only thing I don't understand about Putin is that he's got all the power that, you know, any man who's power crazy could dream of. And I just think, what is his goal here? How much does he want? How much power can someone like that not be satisfied with?
When he gets the USSR back, I think. All right, Stephanie, let's have a look. There's a couple of papers here, The Times and The Sun, both focusing on Prince Harry.
Yeah, he's been working the interview circuit because he's currently in Canada, looking ahead to the Invictus Games next year. So he's done an interview, and, you know, Prince Harry's like a journalist's dream because he's always going to give a bit of golden nuggets. And in an interview that he's done, he did say that he was considering becoming a US citizen. He said it's not high on his priority list, but as you can imagine, the papers are having a field day with this today. I doubt very much he would become an American citizen, especially as this week he's just launched Sussex.com, where he's using his royal titles. So if he was to become an American citizen, he, of course, will not be allowed to use those royal titles.
I can't imagine Meghan would want it.
No, it doesn't work for them financially. And I think, you know, there's contradictions in the papers today, because then in the Times we also have where he's saying that he would like to step in a temporary role for his father while his father is sick, because Harry is still a councillor of the States. So, you know, even though I doubt he will be called, he still does have that role. So I think he is seeming to want to hand an olive branch to the royals and make amends. You know, he did catch that flight to see his father only for about half an hour, 45 minutes, but he seems quite proud of himself for that and quite happy that they had that moment. But
I mean, it's interesting, Madeleine, that he... look, I mean, people pick up on the negative, not surprisingly, with Harry at the moment. But, you know, he did talk about reconciliation, about illnesses bringing families closer together.
Yeah, I mean, that's often the way of things. In many families, that's the case, that a serious illness can bring a family together. However, it was unfortunate, I think, that he gave that interview to the press. This is part of the problem that led to the breakdown in relations, was the fact that the royal family felt that, you know, Harry couldn't be invited to things and, you know, that for them to share information with him without it immediately leaking out. And now yeah. I think what Stephanie said about him as the journalist golden nugget, I mean, it's a very good point. He just can't seem to help himself when it comes to speaking to the press before anybody else.
I think one of the telling lines from this, though, Stephanie, was the fact he was talking about the joy his children gave him.
Yes.
How lovely it was to be a dad, which was lovely, and, you know, Archie and Lilibet, and sort of like how they made him laugh and made him smile, and how it was great to be a dad, which makes it even sadder that both Meghan and Harry are estranged, really, from their own dad.
Well, I think now is where they're really going to have to mend this now, because I think it's almost like reach the full saturation of this whole royal drama. And now that King Charles has been diagnosed with cancer and Kate is recovering from her surgery, those are the big things that matter now, not whatever's happened in the past. And I think for the royals themselves now, they're going to want to have to move forward. And there's going to have to be a new chapter, because you can't keep on feeding this toxicity of Harry and Meghan against the royal family, even though they could be blamed for some of the falling out of this. But we have to move on.
Yeah. It feels like that will require perhaps a bit more in the way of an olive branch from William specifically. You know, it's well known that the king is desperate to reconcile and to have his family back. I mean, you know, he, especially having to confront your own mortality, as anyone with the cancer diagnosis does, you reevaluate things. But William has been very steadfast in not wanting much to do with his brother. So that will require some, I don't know, the Waleses will perhaps have to find some kind of compromise.
Maybe.
Should we talk? Have we got time to talk dentists? Yes. This story terrifies the life out of me, to be honest with you. Madeleine, it's your story, actually. It's not mine story. Foreign dentists are to be allowed to work in the UK without taking the exam to check the qualifications.
This is so...
Just turn up, yank someone's teeth out.
It's just so typical of this government. You know, the answer to everything is to import more people, never get to the underlying problem of why perhaps there is a shortage of dentists, why dentistry across the country has been in disarray. It's like, oh, no, we'll just import a bunch of people. And potentially the idea that you scrap the overseas exams for something as high stakes as dentistry. On the one hand, you can't say it's so important that we must respond to it with this new policy, while also saying it's unimportant enough that we will waive the exam qualifications that we would normally need.
It's very odd.
Yeah,
it's very odd.
I get that at the moment we have people in this country who are pulling their own teeth out. Remember, like you were kids used to tie a bit of string around to the door and slam it, and people are repairing fillings with super glue.
Yeah.
So we've got to do something. But as you say, Madeleine, I mean, we you know, it's like work out why there's a shortage of dentists.
Yes.
Not just import more people to sort the problem out.
Always. And this is just... It shows the short-termism. Also, I suspect it probably is a false economy. It's all about dealing with the shortage in the next, 2 to 3, 5 years, never about the long-term prospects. But of course, those who come here often bring their families require care, their families require public services. So in the long run, it may end up costing the country more. It's classic short-termism at the expense of a longer-term plan.
Are we talking NHS dentistry here rather than private dentistry? It doesn't really seem to say, does it? Which is, I mean, there's no point importing a load of more private dentists.
No,
because people who
can't afford them.
Yeah.
But I think, like, what Dawn is saying is, like, people are so desperate now. If you can't even get an appointment with a dentist, you know, you'll take the next best thing going. You won't even... I don't know how many people actually, when they do go for medical appointments, really check people's qualifications and, you know...
That was the other story this week, actually, wasn't it, Stephanie? And people are actually going to the Ukraine to get dentistry work. A war zone. Yeah. It's easier to get a better dentist in the Ukraine than it is here.
Shockingly cheaper.
But there is also this massive shortage. I mean, I've been trying to get, you know, just booked into a dentist near me, and they're all backed up to the hills.
Yeah.
So the nearest one I could actually get registered with was miles away from where I live. You know, it is a shocking shortage of dentists in the service.
Oh, dear.
Should we talk something that might need you to see a dentist?
Yes, well, it sounds quite nice, actually.
Yes.
Giant pasty, Stephanie.
Yeah, a 2-foot Cornish pasty. Phillips Bakery in Cornwall, they've introduced this massive 2-foot Cornish pasty, and it's 20,000 calories.
What?
20,000 calories, and it costs £28. I wish we had a picture of it to show. It's 10 times the daily intake for women, and it comes available in steak, mince, beef and cheese. And it's all handmade as well, yeah. It looks quite tasty, but very calorific. We should have a picture of it.
Is it one of those pastries that look like like a tortoise, that shape?
I'm trying to work out who's it for. Like, what's it on sale? Is it someone with a big family, maybe?
Oh, it doesn't look that.
It doesn't
look that
Stephen.
massive, though. Let me just...
It's not to scale,
the lady out. No, but there's one underneath.
God.
That.
There's
I feel like I could make...
And a can of pop underneath. It doesn't... It looks like I could eat that.
I know,
Eat
same. I'm
that
kind
in
of
one
worried.
go. Could you eat that in one go?
Yeah, I think I probably could.
Oh, well, it's 20,000 calories?
20,000 calories, come on.
like
That's
I would
10
make-
times the daily intake for women.
Yeah.
That's a lot of dog walking.
They're more like
That's a lot
guidelines
of
anyway.
burpees.
That's honest. Oh, mind you, I'll tell you what, there's a picture at the bottom.
Yeah.
Get a shot. There's a lady at the bottom here holding it. Now, that makes it look... That puts it in a bit more context.
Yeah.
Get it on...
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which way do you want it?
It looks like...
Ah, that's more like it.
Yeah,
now,
there
look at
we
that.
go.
Now, I couldn't eat that.
No.
If you imagine, if you're listening on the radio, imagine someone holding up one of those giant Galapagos tortoises. That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
Yes, don't eat the tortoise, though. Eat the pasty instead.
Yeah.
That's too heavy.
It's a family feast, is that?
It is.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
That can go between, like, 3 people, I think.
Oh,
3.
well, I was going to say 6, Stephanie. It's like in your household.
We like to eat.
Where's it being made? Phillips Bakery in Cornwall, in Hale.
Yeah.
It's
There you
R.
go.
Oh, I've just seen that R, normal R, as in Cornish R.
28. It's £28.
Yep.
Oh, well, there you go.
£28 for a
I
pasty.
wonder how many people buy one of them. I don't know, quite nice. I like a Cornish pasty.
I would love to go to Cornwall to taste the pasty. I've never been to Cornwall.
Really?
No. I'd love to go.
I don't know. Do they taste different in Cornwall than anywhere else? They probably
If
do.
you're having your breakfast this morning and you happen to be eating a 2-foot, 20,000-calorie Cornish pasty, do let us know. GBViews at GB News.
Yeah.
I think, would you have chips with it, though, Stephen?
No, just on its own. That'd be nice, on its own. Lovely. Stephanie Tetchy, Madeline Grant, thank you very much indeed. We shall see you both a little bit later on. And keep your thoughts coming through on anything we're covering this morning. GBViews at gbnews.com. But now let's get a look at the weather for you this morning.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. There will be some heavy rain through this afternoon and the evening, but there will also be some dry spells this weekend, and it is staying very mild. So it is a mild start out there. There is some mist and fog across eastern areas. That should lift and clear to leave some sunshine across eastern areas, particularly through today. It should stay largely dry through much of the morning and into the afternoon here as well. However, across the west, we'll see drizzly rain, particularly across the coast and the hills, and then some quite heavy rain arriving arriving later on into parts of Northern Ireland and parts of West Wales and Western Scotland as well. But it will be feeling very mild once again, particularly in any of the sunshine in the east. As that band of very heavy rain pushes eastwards, we will see some disruption to travel, some difficult driving conditions. So there is a weather warning in force for many areas of England and Wales, and that will push into the southeast by Sunday morning, leaving a much drier start behind it elsewhere in the country. However, there is some uncertainty with how quickly this rain will clear, so I would prepare for a bit of rain in the south and east to start on Sunday. Elsewhere, though, it will be a much drier picture by the morning, away from some heavier showers floating around across northern Scotland. So many areas will see sunny spells through the course of Sunday, fairly light winds as well, so it will feel very pleasant in the sunshine. Still very mild air with us, so temperatures will be climbing to around 15 or 16 degrees in the south, which is very high for the time of year.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Welcome to the show. Superb stuff, great footage. So you're right in the thick of it there. What's the mood on the ground?
Well, I've left there now. I've actually now come to that EU Council summit that I was talking about. It's still pretty chaotic. The entire city of Brussels has been completely clogged with these tractors, sort of three abreast in most of the roads across the city. The people of Brussels aren't particularly happy. I mean, this is sort of reminiscent for some people of the Just Stop Oil protests, you know, people gluing themselves. People are unable to get to hospital appointments, and there's a lot of upset about the destruction that's happening on the streets of Brussels today. But on the other side, there's also the protests, which the farmers are saying that EU green laws simply are not able to fit with what they need to do to keep their businesses going. And just before the protests happened, we saw the European Commission actually make some concessions to the farmers' protests. And this is on the demands that were put on them to set aside somewhere in the region of 5% of their land for regrowing for biodiversity. A lot of the farmers have said that's not possible, and the European Commission has said that they can delay that coming in. So they have won a small concession with these protests.
And Jack, there's a feeling as well, a huge dissatisfaction that the European Union has managed to find 50 billion euros in aid to send to Ukraine, and yet farmers in particular are on the receiving end of net zero targets, taxation on diesel and endless red tape. So many farmers, Jack, saying they're measuring ditches to see if they have to drain them or not. There are minimum requirements on the width of battery hen enclosures. Endless red tape, as Jeremy Clarkson pointed out in Clarkson's farm in Britain. They've simply had enough, and they're shouting, Ursula von der Leyen, we are here.
Good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock on Saturday, the 17th of February. Today,
Vladimir Putin.
Putin is responsible for Navalny's death. Putin is responsible.
Vladimir Putin must pay. World leaders speak out against the Russian regime following the death of opposition leader Alexei Navalny.
James, that's another case altogether. She's a horribly corrupt attorney general, and it's all having to do with election interference.
no one is above the law. A New York court orders Donald Trump to pay £280 million in a civil fraud trial, the former president describing it as a witch hunt.
Prince Harry is reportedly willing to take on a temporary role amid his father's cancer diagnosis.
The Prime Minister's under pressure from his party to turn the Tories' fortunes around, but following that double by-election defeat.
More than 800 potential army recruits were banned from signing up because of their tattoos, amid a shortage of soldiers, though.
Good morning. It's a big day of Premier League action with under pressure David Moyes in defiant mood ahead of West Ham's trip to Nottingham Forest today. Meanwhile, in the cricket, England resume after lunch with a mountain to climb in India. And sad news from the world of cycling, a six-time Olympic champion Chris Hoy reveals his cancer diagnosis.
Good morning. There's a mixed picture out there for many of us this weekend. Some heavy rain to come, but also some spring-like sunshine. Find out all the details with me a little later on.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is Breakfast on GB News on Saturday morning.
In that race for number 10, we're saying Labour, the Prime Minister is saying Labour has no plans, saying to Peter Spencer in the last hour, well, they will have plans, we just don't know what they are yet.
But they don't
They're not telling us. They don't have to tell us.
They don't have to tell us. Why would they? I mean, because,
Not until
the Tories are
manifesto
nick it.
comes out. However, Peter says Labour might not want to share their plans, but the narrative and hope is very much missing. Tony Blair set out his vision and people were drawn to it. Not so with Starmer.
I think that's actually a fair point, isn't it?
Point.
Well, this is what the point I was making to Peter earlier as well. To be fair, whatever you thought of Tony Blair, there was fight, there was... And Margaret Thatcher, they had fight, they had determination, they had plans. They didn't have challenges, they had solutions to problems that they told us about. I'm not getting that now.
No, we're not really. But then, is it still just down to the fact that people just want change anyway, come what may?
Well, did people vote for Labour or did they vote against the Conservatives? And what happened to the Lib Dems?
Yeah, Lib Dems knocked into fourth place.
Yeah. And the Greens, where were they?
Well, the Greens never get much of a vote.
Well, no, I know, but considering we're all meant to be
fair.
so passionate about the Green issue, it doesn't seem to be the case. It doesn't translate into the polls, does it?
No, it'd be interesting to see. I mean, obviously, it wasn't a particular Lib Dem strong area, whether the Lib Dems will still fare very well in what they call the blue wall further south.
But Reform
We
did
shall
well,
see.
didn't they? Reform did well.
Yeah, they did. They did. Right, now let's turn our attention to what's going on in Russia, should we? Leaders from around the world have reacted to the news that the Russian opposition leader, Alexei Navalny, has died in prison.
Reports of his death, if they're true, and I have no reason to believe they're not, Russian authorities are going to tell their own story. But make no mistake, Putin is responsible for Navalny's death. Putin is responsible.
Wow. Navalny was serving a 19-year prison sentence after being convicted of extremism and fraud following his very vocal opposition to Vladimir Putin's regime.
Well, the prison service said Navalny collapsed and lost consciousness as he was out walking. His widow, Yulia, has pleaded with the world to punish Putin.
I want to call on the entire world community, everyone in this room and people around the world, that we come together to unite and defeat this evil, defeat the horrific regime that is now in Russia.
Very brave lady there. Now, our security editor, Mark White, has the full story.
By far Vladimir Putin's most high-profile political opponent, Alexei Navalny remained defiant to the last, an outspoken critic of the Kremlin who refused to remain silent even after his conviction on criminal charges, which his supporters say were politically motivated. And now those same supporters say Putin's regime is the prime suspect in the unexplained death of the opposition politician. Friends, family and his legal team suggested he may have been the victim of poisoning, a deliberate attempt by Russian authorities to silence him. The government in Moscow has dismissed any such suggestion. But for Navalny, it wouldn't be the first time he'd fallen victim to a poisoning attempt. In the summer of 2020, he fell violently ill aboard a passenger plane while on a trip to Siberia. He was flown to Germany and treated by doctors there, who concluded he'd been poisoned by Novichok. The same nerve agent was used against former Russian spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia in Salisbury in 2018. The Kremlin stands accused of regularly using poison as a means of targeting outspoken critics of the regime or perceived traitors to the Russian state. In 2006, in one of the most high-profile incidents, Kremlin critic Alexander Litvinenko was poisoned with the radioactive isotope polonium-210. He suffered an agonising few days before dying in a central London hospital.
A new opposition is appearing. It is being generated now. And Navalny played an important role in it. But at the same time, this opposition requires new ideology.
The death of Alexei Navalny means Vladimir Putin now rules virtually unchallenged. Many of the critical voices who once spoke out against the Russian leader, now jailed, forced into exile, or like Navalny, are dead. By the time he launched his full-scale invasion of Ukraine, many opponents who once tried to hold the Putin government to account have been silenced. There is widespread and understandable concern at the news of Alexei Navalny's death. But getting proper answers about the cause of death will be next to impossible. Like so many similar incidents in the past, the Kremlin will simply insist any allegations of foul play are far-fetched. Mark White, GB News.
Well, Mark mentioned Alexander Litvinenko there. Let's talk to his widow, Marina, who joins us now. It's good to see you this morning. We heard from Yulia Navalny that the world needs to unite and defeat this evil. How can that be done?
Good morning. I really do understand what Yulia Navalny can feel now. It's a very difficult moment for her. And she lost her husband, she lost father of her children, and now she needs to talk to all world how to react. In 2006, when my husband was poisoned, and it was first time radioactive polonium was used against one person, against human, and I plead the world to pay attention. Because leader of Russia, Vladimir Putin, was fully responsible for this crime. It was difficult to prove, but in 2016, we received public inquiry report, and it was official evidence of Putin's crime. I believed after that, world would be more understand what and who they are dealing with. But now we have another case, and Yulia Navalny asked about action. I think it's a very serious test for all world how you will react to this or what happened to Alexei Navalny. Will you accept Putin as the leader of the country? Do you believe you can negotiate with this regime? Do you believe you can trust? And this is a very important, and I think we will have not another chance to make any change for what is happening now to Russia and what is happening to Ukraine.
Marina, do you think the West should actively do something about Putin in Russia itself, or would that reaction be more money into funding the Ukraine?
I think it works together very strong. When we're talking about Putin's regime, we know it's only survived because some countries still keep trading with Russia, and particularly buying oil and gas. And sometimes we can find sanctions what's been provided against Russia. Even companies in the West try to avoid, and why Russia still received some electronic devices what help them to produce new weapons to use in Ukraine. But war in Ukraine, what Russia starts, makes Russia weaker. And this is all discussion. Do we need to support Ukraine? Do we need to make more weapons for Ukraine? I don't think it needs to be discussed. Only from this side, if Ukraine would be supported, we might finally weaken a Russian regime. And people in Russia who are now so frightened to go outside, finally might make any change inside of Russia too.
In a way, what you seem to be suggesting is, I mean, sanctions and how we deal with the oil and gas issue and everything else, it would require us to take some pain as well, as a nation, as a continent, as the West in general. Do you think governments, do you think the people of the United Kingdom would be willing to do that?
I have a lot of people around me. I can't say it's all, but I've never heard they are fed up, help to Ukraine. I never heard that I don't want to support Ukraine in this war. And why I'm talking about Ukraine? Because I see direct link supporting of Ukraine, you're supporting Russia. Because Russia occupied, and this occupation started after 1999, when Putin became, first of all, successor from former President Boris Yeltsin, and now almost 25 years he's in the power. And now we can see how he destroying Russia. And this is just a view, he is a strong leader, but he destroyed a people, became completely brainwashed and became against of the West. And people in Russia believed all West want to put Russia on the knee, what is not true. But this is what we're exactly talking, to support Ukraine, to make this regime weaker. You might make any change, even if this change not going to be immediately possible. But after 25 years, Putin just destroyed any chance to make it democratic.
Marina, I just have to ask you, as a woman, I think Julia has been very brave talking out about her husband, in her words, murder. You've been through this. You know what it feels like. You know what she's going through. How worried you're talking to us now very openly, how worried are you about your own personal safety for talking out, and what sort of protection do you have to take?
You know, after losing your husband, a father of your children, what else you can lose? And I do understand Julia, she was a little bit quiet for all these 2 years when Alexei was in prison. And I do understand she believed one day he would be released from prison. And I believe Putin's regime will collapse much sooner, and 90 years in prison for Navalny never would be extended. But it did not happen. And that moment, Putin won. And for Yulia now, it's very important to keep a memory about Alexei, memory for children of Alexei. And this is memory helps other people to feel strong and brave.
Marina Litvinenko, it's good to talk to you this morning. We appreciate it. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
A couple of views coming through. Elaine in Burford says, our thoughts, love and gratitude are with Alexei Navalny and all who he held dear, but especially to his amazing wife and 2 young sons.
Yeah,
And Sam in Cardiff says, all this outrage and Putin is laughing. How many outrages has there been? They beat Sergei Magnitsky to death in his cell. There's a whole list of people who've died. The Russian economy is booming due to oil sales in India and China, and sanctions are easily circumvented.
Well, exactly that. I mean, it's what do you do? That is the question. I mean, do you literally go in and target Putin in Russia in a more military way? I mean, does anybody really want that? But the thing is, Stephen, Putin has been murdered or trying to murder people in Europe, in this country. And we did nothing then.
It's what can you do? But it's what can you do? And I just don't know.
But we ignored the invasion of Crimea.
We did.
And look what happened there. Something's got to be done. I mean, Marina and Yulia, both so brave talking out, considering how Putin behaves.
Yeah. Very odd situation.
It's horrible.
So you think there'd be a sort of answer, but there just sort of isn't. Donald Trump, would he be an answer if he was president? Would he be a suitable threat?
But he has said that when he was president, times were more peaceful.
Yes.
And he had a point.
Yeah. Would he threaten to bomb Moscow?
Well, I mean, Biden 2 years ago, 2021, was saying, you know, we will take action if Putin doesn't back down. And finally backing down, murder. Well, we don't know. We don't know. This was a 47-year-old man who went for a walk and didn't come back, or came back and was dead when he got back.
Yeah. Anyway, if you've got any views on that, do let us know. Meanwhile, talking of Donald Trump, a judge has ruled that he's got to pay £281 million to New York State for lying about the values of his properties.
He was also banned from serving as a company director or taking out loans from banks in the state for 3 years. This is what Trump had to say about the ruling.
He ruled against me before he even got the case. He ruled against me, said I was guilty. He didn't know what I was guilty of before he even got the case. And Letitia James, that's another case altogether. She's a horribly corrupt attorney general, and it's all having to do with election interference.
Well, let's talk to US political analyst Eric Ham. Morning to you, Eric. Does Donald Trump have a point? Is this purely political persecution?
No, not at all. And we know that the ex-president has tried tying this to President Joe Biden, but we're talking about two different courts. This is a very local entity, a very local crime. It has nothing to do with the president of the United States. And it certainly has nothing to do with his efforts to try to retake the White House. Of course, we know Donald Trump has certainly used it to excite his base and energize his party, which is why he's on the cusp of becoming the nominee for his party. But it certainly has nothing to do with it. And now we're seeing these cases are becoming the sum of all fears for Donald Trump, because now you're looking at two massive judgments and now the beginning of an actual criminal trial, just as the campaign is really beginning to heat up.
Eric, I mean, what happens... Good morning, Eric. What happens if Trump can't pay? I mean, these are huge amounts of money. I mean, who has that sort of money lying around? What happens to him if he just can't simply pay?
Well, if he cannot pay, then they will likely begin to liquidate his assets to actually satisfy this debt. Now, we know that the judge has implemented a 9% interest rate until the debt is actually paid. So it looks like this is going to continue to dog former President Donald Trump. But also we know that Donald Trump has used much of his campaign money to go towards his legal fees. We don't know if he's actually using the money to actually pay these judgments as well. But of course, we know Donald Trump's base has always stood behind him. And it's likely that they certainly would have no problem if, in fact, he was using campaign resources to actually meet the needs of these actual judgments.
OK. Eric Ham, good to talk to you this morning. Thanks very much indeed. God, it's such a mess.
Well, meanwhile, he just gets more... I'm just reading the latest polls. He's getting more and more popular.
Yeah.
The more things he does wrong, whether civil or criminal, the more popular he is.
Yeah, but of course, his base say... none of this is genuine.
Political.
It's all political.
They're out to get him.
Yeah.
He doesn't hold back, does he? I mean, most of us, if we've been handed down that sort of like, oh, my God, how many millions? It's like, oh, right, OK, what am I going to do? And he says, no, this is all political. They're out to get me. It's like, makes you almost grateful for our lot.
John says, why are you giving Trump the benefit of the doubt? When you ask the question, is the whole of the American justice system out to get Trump? Of course not. There are plenty of Republicans who work in the justice system, including judges. Well, that's true, but there is an argument that the way the attorney generals and things work in these various states, they are elected in on a party ticket.
It is a more political system.
It is a more political system.
Absolutely.
I mean, one thing in this country, if you don't like anything else at the minute, because we've got a lot to moan about, at least our judiciary is independent, or...
Well, actually, there was a recent case.
Is meant to be.
Yeah.
Is meant to be.
The recent case of the...
Well, yeah, but that wasn't political, though, was it?
Well,
that's more...
kind of political.
That's more sort of anti-Semitic.
Should we move on?
Yeah, we better have.
Should we talk about Harry?
We can't impugn a judge, though, so you're all right.
Well, no, that's true. No. Although anything's possible, isn't it? In any case, I'm going to talk about Prince Harry because I can. He's reportedly willing to take on a temporary royal role as his father undergoes treatment for cancer.
Yeah, all this comes as Harry spoke in public for the first time about the King's diagnosis.
Speaking to ABC News in the US, Harry said he thought the sad news had brought his family together.
How did you get the news that the King was ill?
I spoke to him.
And what did you do next?
I jumped on a plane and went to go and see him as soon as I could.
How was that visit for you emotionally?
Look, I love my family. The fact that I was able to get on a plane and go and see him and spend any time with him, I'm grateful for that.
An illness in the family can have a galvanizing or sort of reunifying effect for a family.
Absolutely.
Is that possible in this case?
Yeah, I'm sure. Throughout all these families, I see it on a day-to-day basis. The strength of the family unit coming together.
I don't know how to make of that, really, because he's responding to questions It's what you do. If you pose the right question, you'll get the sort of answer that you want. Do you know what I mean?
You could always say, you've interviewed enough people. Between us, we've interviewed loads. But you can always say at the beginning of an interview, I don't want to talk about this subject.
Yeah, well, he didn't really say a great deal, though. I've got to say, to give him the benefit of the doubt, he didn't say a great deal about...
No, it wasn't a great interview. There were so many questions I wanted. Sort of like, all right, you're lucky enough to jump on a plane and go and see your dad, but why only 35 minutes?
Oh, yeah, but there's a big argument on that to say that's all the king could handle.
Well...
Because if you're not well...
No one's that ill.
Oh.
Surely? Well, then he got on... But then the king and the queen got on a helicopter to fly to Sandringham.
Yeah.
How ill are you? Seriously?
Oh, I don't know. Oh, you're harsh. Let's talk to royal expert Pandora Forsyth. She's harsh.
I'm loving the debate, guys. I'm loving the debate. Take my seat, please.
What do you make of it all, Pandora?
Look, cagey answers. Didn't go into detail. At least he's respecting the king's privacy, which, given the past couple of years, all the coverage we've had, people would say perhaps he hasn't been. So that's a big bonus for the royal family. He hasn't gone into detail about it.
Which is, I mean, to be honest, when the news dropped yesterday, and the way they pitched it, actually, we thought it could be a lot worse.
Yeah, exactly. So that is one good thing. Potential more visits to the UK as well. I'm sure we'll be hearing lots about that. I doubt Meghan and the children will be coming over, I will say that, because they've got their own thing going on. They've relaunched their site this week, haven't they, to sussex.com. So they've got their own rebrand going on in Hollywood, and I'm sure, well, I say Hollywood, California and Canada. So she will very much be focusing on that, whilst Harry will be, I guess, from afar, seeing if the king, his father, is OK.
How do you think the whole Sussex rebranding will go down with King Charles and William?
I'm not sure William will even pay much attention to it, given the fact that he didn't even see his brother when he was over here. And there was ample opportunity for them to meet. I don't think he'll even feed into it, to be honest. I'm sure the king will be kept up to date with all of these movements from the people that worked him closely, all of his aides. But as long as he's not revealing family secrets about his health, I'm sure the king will be fine with it. As soon as Harry spills more on his health diagnosis, I'm sure then that's when action will be taken.
Would you say when?
Yeah, well, I did, didn't I?
You did.
I mean, I'll take that back. Not when. Let's just hope. Let's just hope. That was an opportunity for him to reveal all, and he didn't. So that kind of gives me a glimmer of a hope that the chat did go well. You know, albeit very short chat.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Yeah. I think it's so sad, though, Pandora, that, amongst your own family, you're so frightened of saying anything, just in case it gets turned into the new Netflix documentary or the new...
Well, this is the issue. This is the issue. And Harry knows, even with that interview, that he had to give a little bit of info on the king. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to plug the Winter Invictus Games. So that's their problem. They need to be relevant with the royal family, and this has always been their problem going across.
Well, what about this whole issue about being a temporary royal or, on royal duties for the king?
I mean, I really don't think that will happen, because Harry said he loves his family and he loves his children, which is very sweet, very nice, and they've got their own little unit over there. How is he going to juggle those responsibilities from over there? I don't see a way of that working, given everything that's happening in the UK with him at the moment in terms of public opinion. There is no way that could happen unless, he wins back the public's trust, which is going to be quite difficult. Bit of a feat, I think.
I'm just looking at... I know we're out of time. I'm just looking I'm looking at their website. All this fuss about the rebranding on the website.
Yeah.
There's nothing on it.
Well,
there's literally nothing on it.
And Meghan has praised the collaborators, not the designers, collaborators. She's worked with them for many years, apparently, 10 years. So that's a nice partnership there. But, I mean, given everything that looks on the website, even the colour is quite regal.
Well,
and of course, they've got the coat of arms there and all the rest of it. I mean, that is a fabulous picture, isn't it?
It's a great picture, but literally all there is a biography of them. And that is it.
Yeah, I mean...
So I don't really know. If
I mean, I do wonder the cost of all of that. But, I mean, that's a whole other thing, isn't it?
I could have done it for 100 quid. That one. Could have done. Pandora, thank you very much.
Thank you, Pandora.
And if you would like a website designing, do feel free to get in touch. No, I mean, there's just nothing to it. So it's like, well, what's the fuss about?
Well, I mean...
Just do it. Sussex.com.
It's
so
a picture and some colour purple. Any case, let's talk about the weather with the lovely Annie Shuttleworth, shall we?
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. There will be some heavy rain through this afternoon and the evening, but there will also be some dry spells this weekend, and it is staying very mild. So it is a mild start out there. There is some mist and fog across eastern areas. That should lift and clear to leave some sunshine across eastern areas, particularly through today. They should stay largely dry through much of the morning and into the afternoon here as well. However, across the west, we'll see drizzly rain, particularly across the coasts and the hills, and then some quite heavy rain arriving later on into parts of Northern Ireland and parts of West Wales and Western Scotland as well. But it will be feeling very mild once again, particularly in any of the sunshine in the east. As that band of very heavy rain pushes eastwards, we will see some disruption to travel, some difficult driving conditions. So there is a weather warning in force for many areas of England and Wales, and that will push into the southeast by Sunday morning, leaving a much drier start behind it elsewhere in the country. However, there is some uncertainty with how quickly this rain will clear, so I would prepare for a bit of rain in the south and east to start on Sunday. Elsewhere, though, it will be a much drier picture by the morning, away from some heavier showers floating around across northern Scotland. So many areas will see sunny spells through the course of Sunday, fairly light winds as well, so it will feel very pleasant in the sunshine. Still very mild air with us, so temperatures will be climbing to around 15 or 16 degrees in the south, which is very high for the time of year.
Now it's time for the Great British Giveaway, and you could bank £18,000 in tax-free cash. So make sure you don't miss out. Here's how you can make that cash yours.
Time is ticking on your chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash. That's like having an extra £1,500 each month for the next year. Listen to the moment we told Phil from West Yorkshire he'd won our last Great British Giveaway.
Hello? Phil, I've got some really good news for you. You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
You're joking. That's brilliant news.
For another chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 23rd of February. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Good luck.
Good luck with that one. We're not allowed to enter, are we?
No, we're not.
Damn. So you can win it. Right, now, I love this story. Should the military's restrictions on tattoos be relaxed to accommodate the hiring crisis? This is GB News this is Breakfast on GB News Even with Stephen and Dawn.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, you know, one year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Now, more than 800 potential army recruits were rejected because their tattoos were deemed too obvious. And, of course, all this is happening amidst a hiring crisis for the armed forces.
Rules were relaxed more than a decade ago to allow tattoos on the neck and the hand, but the army considers it unacceptable to have head and face inkings.
So we're asking, should those restrictions on tattoos be relaxed to accommodate the current problem?
OK, now, joining us now is tattoo artist Jade Wildman and media commentator Fahima Mohammed. Thank you very much for... Oh, fabulous tattoo there. Right, OK, I've just ruined the debate for my impartiality, haven't I?
Gone out the
sorry.
window.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning, ladies. Look, we have an army recruitment crisis, OK? We're potentially on the brink of a war in the Ukraine, problems in the Middle East. Surely a tattoo doesn't actually matter. Jade, I'm going to come to you first on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't believe there should be any restrictions on tattoos, especially during a military crisis. Tattooed or not, there isn't a difference on who you are and how well you can do something.
Fahima?
I think that there's a wider conversation around this because the thing is, in the UK, studies recently by YouGov, it revealed there's only 26% of the British population that have tattoos. And within that, there's only 11% of that which will have visible tattoos. So if you're talking about wanting to have ease of or relaxation of regulations in order for the military to actually recruit, I think it's really using a very minute proportion of the population. And they're not saying that tattoos are not allowed. It's just the fact that if it's visible. And again, there's also 63% of the general public in the UK that consider, especially tattoos around the neck and face, which is what is being really spoken about, to be very unprofessional and unpopular. The army has their reasons for these regulations because of cultural sensitivity. The fact that the army is not just there to fight battles, but to represent, to be there to actually out there to represent the UK, to serve and to actually take care. And there's such a variety of jobs within the army that it may not be suitable. And we know in the UK that a lot of the times there is a much wider conversation as to why people are not actually joining the army. And that's mainly due to the fact that a lot of the population don't actually agree with and trust and support the institutes, their policies, and even going for it. So I think that, this conversation should be a lot wider than what's being discussed right now.
Well, yeah, possibly so. But nevertheless, this is what we're talking about this morning. But Jade, I mean, it's got to be said, a lot of people, a lot of businesses wouldn't want to hire someone who's got facial tattoos. I mean, even if you see someone in the street with facial tattoos, it is quite unusual and it can be a little bit off-putting.
No, I do agree that to the general public. That is the image that is put out there. Obviously, a lot of people that I work with or are friends with are heavily tattooed and do have facial tattoos. And these people are some of the most polite, hardworking, kind people that I've ever met. And I really honestly don't think it has an impact on who you are and how qualified you are to do something or how hardworking you are as a person.
No, and that's an absolutely valid point. It doesn't say who you are as a person, but it is about image, and within the armed forces, where image actually is very important. Could it? I mean, you could appreciate how it could be problematic, do you?
I could, but then again, I could argue that tattoos have been around for 12,000 years. And we can go back to Maori Polynesian islands, where they would have facial tattoos to represent their rank or to, explain their story on whatever battle they were fighting. And only the highest in that rank, or in the military or in the tribe, received those facial tattoos. So going further back, it used to be a mark of honour. In culture, and now it seems to have just developed a stigma that just really shouldn't exist. It shouldn't be around.
All right, we've got to leave it there, sadly. Jade, Fahima, thank you both very much indeed. If you've got any views on that, let us know. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Still to come, a bumper Premier League programme today with 7 matches affecting issues at the top and bottom of the table.
We'll have an update on the condition of Crystal Palace boss Roy Hodgson, who took ill yesterday and remains in hospital. We'll have an update just a few minutes from now. More misery for England and India as well. They're all out for 319.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
When you listen to Nigel Farage's assessment there, do you feel that maybe this is as good as it was going to get, given that we had the pandemic and it was inevitably always going to be a bit of a mixed bag?
Well, I think it's a bit of a poor excuse from Nigel there that they haven't done it properly. The facts are, Nigel, that it's not worked. It's not going to work. Yes, we will rejoin. I mean, are we better off for it? Are they...
Can I jump in there, Charlie? We're going to rejoin under which government? Because Labour aren't going to do that, unless you don't think...
But I mean, it's going to be unavoidable not to join, because I think it's getting worse and worse for us. I mean, let me just say this. Are the NHS better because we're out of Europe? No, they're not, because they're not employing more staff. Is the building trade better off? No. Is travelling abroad or to the EU or staying in the EU, are we better off? No. Are we better off because foods rise because of the EU? No. Are we better off with imports and export? No, because they're taking longer. The overall result is that we're not better off. The killer point here is 57% of the public will now vote to remain. 33% would leave. Surely that's the telling point.
It depends on the pollster, Charlie, because we were talking to a very good pollster earlier who said there's no enthusiasm for any change in a year. Maybe 10 years, they might be thinking about it.
Belinda de Lucia, let's bring you in. I'm sure you want to react to what Charlie said.
I mean, who would have thought that the UK wanting to run its own affairs and making our politicians more accountable would be so revolutionary? EU Parliament voted a majority to get rid of the vetoes, the last remaining scraps of democracy that the EU had. Now, luckily for EU citizens at the moment, you know, it means a treaty change to actually go forward. But that is the mood. The ever closer union. We have dodged a federalised, globalist, international, power-gobbling, anti-democratic organisation, and that's worth more than a few trade and travel perks for a few wealthy people in this country.
Hear, hear. Belinda de Lucia, Charlie Mullins, great to see you both.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Let's have a look at all the sport with Aidan McGee. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Give us an update, would you, on Roy Hodgson?
Well, he's
still in hospital, isn't he?
He is, yeah. I mean, it's a very tricky situation because there was due to a press conference in Beckenham at their training ground yesterday around about 1 o'clock, and he took ill at training in the morning, so he wasn't able to attend the press conference. He was going to face a barrage of questions. You have to wonder whether the stress, or this was stress-induced, because lots of speculation around his job. They've won, I think, 3 matches since September. They've been under real pressure, having done well last season, to keep them up. He has had a couple of minor health issues earlier in the season and at the back end of last as well, so it is a little bit of a worry. But he's the club announced yesterday or last night, they said, following news that Roy Hodgson was taken ill during today's training session, we can confirm that he's now stable and undergoing tests. Now, the situation here, Dawn, is that, as you saw yesterday, there were loads of speculation that the former Eintracht Frankfurt coach, Oliver Glasner, was due to step in. Now, they've got a game against Everton on Monday. What do you do as Crystal Palace if you've got a decision to make if you're Steve Parish? I mean, do you sack a club legend while he's in hospital?
While he's in hospital?
No. And he's a big name. It's Roy Hodgson. He's not somebody just known well inside football. Everyone knows who Roy Hodgson is. It looks very disrespectful.
They've got to wait. They've just got to wait.
I know. They have indeed.
David Moyes is under pressure.
Yes.
It's a very high-pressure job, football management.
Well,
isn't
it is. I mean, they go to Nottingham Forest today. They're I mean, look, West Ham are, I think, 8th in the table. I mean, to me, Palace are 5 points ahead of the drop zone, and sometimes we're just a little bit overreactive. Sometimes West Ham travel to Forest. Forest have been in patchy form under Nuno Espirito Santos, but he's challenged his players to own up for these defensive mistakes. They conceded 6 goals at home to Arsenal last Sunday, Dawn. There were thousands of fans making. There were fans making for the exits at half-time as well. I thought West Ham fans didn't do that sort of thing, Dawn. I thought you stayed loyal to the end.
I can go off you, Aidan, very rapidly.
Hey, mind you, we've got a huge match today, Manchester City against Chelsea.
5:30, yeah, exactly. Now, Cole Palmer is playing for Chelsea. He's been fantastic for them this year, one of the shining lights in a difficult season. Pep Guardiola said yesterday, it's my fault that he left Manchester City. He just didn't think he could accommodate him. And it's hard for Cole Palmer. He grew up in a Manchester City supporting family. He saw his future as being at City, but they just couldn't squeeze him in there. And he's gone to Chelsea and it's done well. He's worked out OK for him. He's probably going to go to the Euros next summer. But City can really solidify their position near the top of the table if they win that game.
A lot of matches today. What else have we got?
Loads of matches today. We've got Brentford are first out the blocks against Liverpool at 12:30. So Liverpool could steal a march on Manchester City early on. A word on the cricket as well while we've got time. England all out for 319. So it doesn't seem like long ago we were saying they're at lunch, but they didn't have much. It's almost like they went out on full stomachs and couldn't handle it because they're all out. They've been skittled out. It was a tough ask anyway. But yeah, that's done for now.
OK. Aidan, thank you. We'll see you a little bit later on. We've got the papers heading away in just a couple of minutes. Lovely.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World. Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yeah.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially, just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, you know, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offender behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr Jane, and I guess for some people, you know, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Carson, this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yay! It's paper time, Stephen.
It is paper
we
time.
love this bit, don't we? It is, and joining us to go through them is columnist and parliamentary sketch writer at Telegraph, Madeleine Grant, and showbiz supremo, Stephanie Cecchi.
Morning, you two.
Morning. Morning.
Should we have a look at various front pages and things, Madeleine, looking at Alexei Navalny?
Yes, that's right. So The Guardian and The Eye, both on their front page, lead with the story that hundreds of protesters, many of them Russian emigres, have gathered in cities around the world to pay tribute to Alexei Navalny, and often gathering outside Russian embassies. They've chanted slogans critical of Vladimir Putin and generally giving a strong sense of, you know, the global solidarity that all democracy lovers around the world must feel at a time like this.
Do you think we'll see something similar in London, Madeleine?
I'm sure we will. In fact, it's already happening. Yeah. But actually, what
difference does it make?
Yeah, that's the question. And I was about to say that there's already... Well, I think it means a lot to people in Russia who may feel emboldened, you know, courage calls to courage everywhere. Maybe they'll look and see that the world is standing with them. But the thing that that upsets me most is that there were, in the circumstances, extraordinarily brave people actually going to pay tribute in Russia, leaving tributes for Navalny. And it was reported that the Russian government has already started to arrest the people who turned up to mourn, or at least to disperse them from gathering in one place. So it gives you a sense of, you know, just the sheer level of censorship and authoritarianism.
OK. Stephanie, let's have a look at something which is entirely different but utterly awful in The Guardian.
Yeah.
Valentine's cards.
Yeah, so...
Wait for this one.
Well, I'm trying to get my head round it and where I stand in terms of opinion, but a firm of funeral directors, they sent a Valentine's Day cards to residents of the care home. The families... The families have said, of course, it's horrible, it's an appalling stunt. They said, you know, some of them had to remove the cards before it actually got to their relatives because for some of them it was quite triggering for them missing their other halves. But also, if it was a chocolate company sending it, I think maybe they would have been a bit more open to it. But because it's a funeral directors...
Yeah.
It's definitely hasn't gone down well. But surprisingly, some of the care home residents actually said they quite liked receiving the card.
What has the care home said about it? What's the reasoning they've given behind it?
They said they were thrilled to receive the cards. I think the funeral directors, they misjudged it, but...
Yeah, I mean, they've admitted it was misjudged.
It was misjudged. But the thing is, it then comes to think, you know, people in care homes, no one really thinks about them, you know? And when it comes to Valentine's Day, it is a day of love.
Well, yes, but it's all about advertising, isn't it? It's an advertising ploy. I mean, really, do you want to advertise to people? You plan ahead.
Yeah.
Use us. It's not really what you want, is it?
Not in a care home. I just think it's quite interesting that the care home residents, many of them were thrilled by it.
Yeah.
I think sometimes as you get older, you're dealing with mortality in a way that younger people are not, and actually often develop quite a dark sense of humour about these things. You know.
Flowers, chocolate, or an oak client. What would you write? Oak or a basket? What do you think of basket these days for funeral?
I don't know.
They've apologised for it. They said, we deeply regret any distress caused by the Valentine's cards.
Yes.
But then there is that question, I think, you know, for some people who are in care homes, they have kind of made peace.
Well, yes.
That they are dying, so that's why maybe some of them were thrilled.
I should think, you know, the relatives would probably get more upset, to be honest with you. My mum's
Everyone else around
I know both my grandparents would have found it really funny, and they were always making reference to, you know, even when they were, you know, late 70s, so at least 12 more years on the planet, they were still making jokes about how, like, this is the last pair of shoes I will ever own and this kind of thing.
Yeah, well, look, it's all...
I admire that.
Yeah, and look, that's healthy to it. It's just...
No, this was obviously
it's a bit distasteful.
This was tinted.
Can we have a look at a C-section for a gorilla, Madeleine, in the Star?
Yes, we can. And this is a story from Fort Worth, Texas, where a gorilla that was giving birth suffered a condition called preeclampsia, which is not uncommon in humans, but to be honest, I had no idea that animals could experience. And so they had to get a human gynecologist for humans to tend to the gorilla in her labour. And he said he was struck by how similar it was in many ways to a human labour. So I guess it's a point for Charles Darwin there.
Yeah.
Well, we're not that far removed, are we?
No, well, we've got 99% the same DNA, haven't we?
Yeah. Good
with
to be
gorillas.
reminded of that.
So there you go. So this... I've tried... Have you ever got the name of the gorilla? No, I can't see it here.
I don't know if they have the name of the baby girl, but the mother gorilla was called Sekani.
Sekani,
Sekani.
The Western Lowland gorilla. Oh, good for that.
Oh.
Can I talk about this story, please? Stephanie, it's your story.
Yep.
Menopausal gift sets.
Yeah,
Talking about gifts,
I've
we've had Valentine's Day cards from funeral directors, and now we are having... What's this one about?
Menopausal gifts. It's from Avanti West Coast, the rail union. Basically, they've created a menopausal gift bag for women who are going through menopause, and it includes a fan, a tissue, a jelly baby, and these also have been slammed. Women have said it's demeaning and it's an insulting gimmick. The Rail Union has hit back and they said that was not their point of doing this. Actually, it was to support women, and it was actually made in-house by women who are going through menopause themselves. Look, at the moment in society, we're all having this big conversation about menopause, and it seems like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah, I mean, but why do you have... It's like it's so jumping on the woke wagon, isn't it? Saying, oh, we've got to acknowledge menopause and then we'll give you a little gift bag.
Yeah.
And just remind me, Stephanie, what the jelly baby was for?
The jelly baby was in case to make you feel sweet.
Oh,
in case
God.
you feel you need support.
Oh, my God.
You get support from a jelly baby.
Well, it's basically, they also say, in case you feel like biting the head off of someone. Because menopausal women can be a bit feisty, I think.
In that sense, I do find it demeaning, in that sense. Like, some women would like it, but then other women will find it quite controversial.
Give them a day off. That'll go down better.
That would be
It's
better.
a bit patronising, isn't it? I mean, imagine if they started giving out, like, gift bags to women, you know, that time of the month even. You know, here's this in case you have a bad mood. It's all a bit...
It's all a bit weird.
Stereotypical.
Madeleine, Stephanie, we've got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed.
Talking of hot flushes, shall we find out what the weather's doing?
Oh,
sorry.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. There will be some heavy rain through this afternoon and the evening, but there will also be some dry spells this weekend, and it is staying very mild. So it is a mild start out there. There is some mist and fog across eastern areas. That should lift and clear to leave some sunshine across eastern areas, particularly through today. It should stay largely dry through much of the morning and into the afternoon here as well. However, across the west, we'll see drizzly rain, particularly across the coast and the hills, and then some quite heavy rain around arriving later on into parts of Northern Ireland and parts of West Wales and Western Scotland as well. But it will be feeling very mild once again, particularly in any of the sunshine in the east. As that band of very heavy rain pushes eastwards, we will see some disruption to travel, some difficult driving conditions. So there is a weather warning in force for many areas of England and Wales, and that will push into the southeast by Sunday morning, leaving a much drier start behind it elsewhere in the country. However, there is some uncertainty with how quickly this rain will clear, so I would prepare for a bit of rain in the south and east to start on Sunday. Elsewhere, though, it will be a much drier picture by the morning, away from some heavier showers floating around across northern Scotland. So many areas will see sunny spells through the course of Sunday, fairly light winds as well, so it will feel very pleasant in the sunshine. Still very mild air with us, so temperatures will be climbing to around 15 or 16 degrees in the south, which is very high for the time of year.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
Questions to be answered, and there seem to be a significant amount, does once again point its way to a public inquiry into exactly what happened in this case. Starmer's called for that. Would you call for that too?
I certainly think that first of all, there's one thing that's happening now. The NHS have to order an independent inquiry. That's been done. So they've got to look at all the whys and wherefores of what happened with this man. If it appears that we're not getting sufficient depth and breadth to this, then I think having an inquiry with all the powers that brings would be extremely advantageous. What I don't want is some long-winded inquiry that will take years, by which time other people will have been put at risk and maybe other lives have lost. We know what the problems are here, Camilla. Law's been passed on this. This is all about making sure on the ground we implement the highest degree of monitoring in order to ensure the safety of the public.
Has care in the community failed? I mean, it seems oxymoronic to say that it's care in the community in this case. We know that the number of psychiatric care beds has been slashed from 52,000 back in 2001 to 24,000 now. I've anecdotally, because I wrote my column about this in The Telegraph yesterday, received quite a lot of correspondence from people saying the situation with care in the community is dire. People aren't being adequately monitored. Was it a mistake to close down all of those mental institutions?
I don't think we should go back to those days when we had those appalling institutions where we just lock people away and forget about them, and not just mental health people, but autistic people and disabled people. Horrific way to treat individuals, and you know I campaign on that a lot.
I know.
However, I think if we move into a more community-based approach, which can be really good for many, many people who are on the spectrum and on that scale of mental health, we have to remember there will be a small but significant number who will continue to pose a danger.
Okay.
And that's why monitoring is so important.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock on Saturday, the 17th of February. Today.
Mistake. Putin is responsible for Navalny's death. Putin is responsible.
Vladimir Putin must pay. World leaders speak out against the Russian regime following the death of opposition leader Alexei Navalny.
Letitia James, that's another case altogether. She's a horribly corrupt attorney general, and it's all having to do with election interference.
No one is above the law. A New York court orders Donald Trump to pay around £280 million in his civil fraud trial, with the former president describing it as a witch hunt.
Prince Harry is reportedly willing to take on a temporary royal role amid his father's cancer diagnosis.
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is under pressure from his party to turn the Tory fortunes round following a double by-election defeat.
A bride-to-be is facing criticism after asking her guests to pay for their meals at her wedding. Is it rude? We'll debate that this hour.
Good morning. There was misery for England in India. The tourists all out for 319 and trailing by 126 runs after the first innings. In the Premier League, meanwhile, both Roy Hodgson and David Moyes are fighting for their jobs. And sad news from the world of cycling as six-time Olympic champion Chris Hoy reveals his cancer diagnosis.
Good morning. There's a mixed picture out there for many of us this weekend. Some heavy rain to come, but also some spring-like sunshine. Find out all the details with me a little later on.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Just a quick one on tattoos in the military. Richard in Chichester says, I served 32 years in the Royal Navy. I've got 6 tattoos, but having viewed several programmes on the military over the last few years, I'm appalled at some of the servicemen's tattoos. They look unprofessional and are not conducive with service life. I know times change, but standards need to be maintained.
That's interesting, isn't it? And the military is very disciplined as well. I mean, you know, shiny boots, perfect uniforms. However, while I would think maybe twice about someone with a tattoo across their forehead about to perform surgery on me in a hospital theatre...
Why?
Well, because it might be a bit off-putting, a bit scary, but if someone's fighting to save my life on the front line, they can have whatever they want tattooed on their face and their neck.
Oh, well. Keep your thoughts coming through on that one. gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, leaders from around the world have reacted to the news that the Russian opposition leader, Alexei Navalny, has died in prison.
Reports of his death, if they're true, and I have no reason to believe they're not, Russian authorities are going to tell their own story. But make no mistake, Putin is responsible for Navalny's death. Putin is responsible.
Right, Navalny was serving a 19-year prison sentence after being convicted of extremism and fraud following his very vocal opposition to Vladimir Putin's regime.
Well, the prison service said Navalny collapsed and lost consciousness during a walk. His widow, Yulia, has pleaded with the world to punish Putin.
I want to call on the entire world community, everyone in this room and people around the world, that we come together to unite and defeat this evil, defeat the horrific regime that is now in Russia.
A very brave lady there. Our security editor, Mark White, has the full story.
By far Vladimir Putin's most high-profile political opponent, Alexei Navalny remained defiant to the last, an outspoken critic of the Kremlin who refused to remain silent even after his conviction on criminal charges, which his supporters say were politically motivated. And now those same supporters say Putin's regime is the prime suspect in the unexplained death of the opposition politician. Friends, family and his legal team suggested he may have been the victim of poisoning, a deliberate attempt by Russian authorities to silence him. The government in Moscow has dismissed any such suggestion. But for Navalny, it wouldn't be the first time he'd fallen victim to a poisoning attempt. In the summer of 2020, he fell violently ill aboard a passenger plane while on a trip to Siberia. He was flown to Germany and treated by doctors there, who concluded he'd been poisoned by Novichok. The same nerve agent was used against former Russian spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia in Salisbury in 2018. The Kremlin stands accused of regularly using poison as a means of targeting outspoken critics of the regime or perceived traitors to the Russian state. In 2006, in one of the most high-profile incidents, Kremlin critic Alexander Litvinenko was poisoned with the radioactive isotope polonium-210. He suffered an agonising few days before dying in a central London hospital.
A new opposition is appearing. It is being generated now. And Navalny played an important role in it. But at the same time, this opposition requires new ideology.
The death of Alexei Navalny means Vladimir Putin now rules virtually unchallenged. Many of the critical voices who once spoke out against the Russian leader, now jailed, forced into exile, or like Navalny, are dead. By the time he launched his full-scale invasion of Ukraine, many opponents who once tried to hold the Putin government to account have been silenced. There is widespread and understandable concern at the news of Alexei Navalny's death. But getting proper answers about the cause of death will be next to impossible. Like so many similar incidents in the past, the Kremlin will simply insist any allegations of foul play are far-fetched. Mark White, GB News.
Well, let's talk to the ex-partner of Putin's former banker, Alexandra Tolstoy, here in the studio. Good to see you this morning.
Good morning.
Why would Putin do this?
Well, I think it's fairly obvious that he wants to get rid of all his opposition. I think it's also a sign showing his power. He doesn't care. It's completely flagrant.
Well, because that's the thing. If it was, he's got to know what the international reaction would be. Just say he just doesn't care about that.
Doesn't care about the international reaction. Just like Stalin didn't care and disposed of all his opponents in just the same way, he doesn't care. And for his domestic audience, it's a big message.
So, Ed, what can the West do? What should the West do to stop him?
Oh, well, I do not think we should be negotiating over Ukraine. I think, you know, all this talk of appeasement and peace talks, that's just proven that it's just hopeless. Putin is not a person who compromises or sticks to his word or listens. So I think that, and I hope in America they'll be watching and listening.
Well, Putin did say back in 2021 that there will be consequences. I mean, that was then. This is the latest
Biden,
incident.
yeah.
Biden. So, you know, there will be consequences. That was then. I mean, what consequences can there possibly be?
Well, I think we're talking, specifically about Ukraine, that we should be continuing to support Ukraine. We should absolutely not be compromising and handing over half the... last week, Lavrov, the foreign minister, was making the same threatening messages about Moldova. And we have to see, you know, there's been a lot of talk with this ridiculous Tucker Carlson thing that Putin is a person who can be dealt with, who can be negotiated with. Why aren't we doing peace talks? I don't think that's true at all.
What about, interesting that you say this is a message to the Russian people as much as anyone. Is that a sign that he feared there was a growing opposition, a growing strength of opposition?
Well, no, because I think over the last 15 years he's completely annihilated the opposition. But I think it's just more and more of a message, you know, don't even bother. And last night, some very brave people, I think a lot of young, went out and put flowers out. Overnight, they've been removed, the flowers. People have been arrested. This is just a message. And, you know, people I know will be too scared to talk about it. You know, and it would be almost an intrusion for me to message them and say something because...
In case it's monitored.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I think his widow is very brave to speak out.
Yeah.
And we spoke to our Marina Litvinenko earlier on as well, also very bravely speaking out. What would stop Putin? What is going to stop him? I mean, the war in Ukraine could go on and on and on.
I mean, sadly, I think it's only in the same way with the Soviet Union that it's either a collapse, which unfortunately, economically, it doesn't look like that's going to happen, or it's a military or some kind of a coup. But, you know, he's just stopped the only realistic candidate running in the presidential elections. He gathered more than 100,000 signatures. He was the only anti-war candidate, Nadezhda, and then he's been eliminated. So I think all we can do now in the West is protect ourselves, and it's not by peace talks and it's not by appeasement.
No. What about the action? I mean, Trump, would he be an answer to all of this? should he decide, should he win and should he decide to take the appropriate position? I mean, he is the type of person who would say, well, I'll bomb Moscow. I'll bomb the Kremlin. I mean, not to say that would happen, but that sort of threat, and knowing that he is someone who actually...
Yeah, so I think it's very frightening to have these two very unpredictable and egotistical, because really, Putin, I think, with Navalny, it was a huge, huge personal insult to his ego. Even just the way Navalny looks, he's an extremely good-looking guy. He's got this amazing wife, this absolutely perfect family story. Putin, claims to be the head of or very, very orthodox. Everybody knows he's living with his lover. He doesn't look great. And we saw him yesterday in Chelyabinsk. He looked like a weasel, like a puffy weasel, just smarmy, smiling. And I think he finds it so frustrating that this young, dynamic, extremely popular guy... so it was also a personal...
Is he mentally unwell?
Putin is, yes, I'm sure he is. I think he's got...
Mentally unwell or a psychopath?
Well, no, I think he's got narcissistic personality disorder, probably. And also, in the same way that Stalin, he's gone completely mad because, we read all sorts of criticism. He doesn't have the internet, and he just has this tiny echo chamber around him. And we saw on Tucker Carlson's show, I think Tucker Carlson was expecting him at least to give some kind of presentable conservative values, and instead he just went rambling on, and he's got really no clue about his self-awareness, how he looks, what he's saying.
Everyone at every front page around the world, everyone's saying this was Putin's doing, they had him murdered. Russia are obviously saying he went for a walk and he collapsed and died.
Yeah, I don't think it matters what they say, whether he was literally poisoned at the last minute or whether he had a heart attack. He was killed by the Russian state, because the fact is he was put in solitary confinement for 27 days, I think, and it's illegal after 15 days because it's considered so tough on your health. It can make your liver collapse, your kidneys collapsed, and they just kept putting him in. The last time was because he demanded his pen to be returned to him. So they put him in solitary confinement. You don't have warm enough clothes, he's in the Arctic Circle. It doesn't, he was killed by the Russian state, of course he was.
Simone in Buckinghamshire has been in touch. She says there's nothing the West can do. Any change to the leadership in Russia must be made by the Russians alone. She says, she goes on to say the vast majority like and want Putin. Well, they may do, but any change is not, as we know, is not going to be done democratically.
No.
Is there a realistic chance, actually, no doubt pushed on by the West, that someone could take some decisive action?
I think sadly not. I think that he really was the last chance, but I don't think, his death has definitely not been in vain. I think it probably has galvanised, especially young people who... You can't argue with this, that it's absolutely brutal, and it's just no different from the time of Stalin, when these ridiculous show trials, these fake convictions. Everybody knows he wasn't... He was convicted of being an extremist. Of course he wasn't an extremist.
OK.
But no, I don't think there's much hope, sadly.
Alexandra Tolstoy, good to see you.
Thank
you very much indeed.
Right.
It's thoroughly depressing, actually.
It's very... Because I don't know what the answer is. Nobody knows what the answer is. What are we meant to do? Carry on funding Ukraine very well, but that's not going to stop Putin. Doesn't seem to be, does it? Because he's still behaving like this.
If you've got any thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, a judge has ruled that former President Trump must pay nearly £281 million to New York State for lying about the value of his properties.
He was also banned from serving as a company director or taking out loans from banks in the state for 3 years. This is what Trump had to say after the ruling.
He ruled against me before he even got the case. He ruled against me, said I was guilty. He didn't know what I was guilty of before he even got the case. And Letitia James, that's another case altogether. She's a horribly corrupt attorney general, and it's all having to do with election interference.
Well, earlier we spoke to Professor of History at the US Army War College, Ronald Granieri.
We don't have many other experiences with someone running for president who is subject to these kinds of, subject to these kinds of legal problems. He's within his rights to say that he's not guilty, but he also valued Mar-a-Lago to be worth more than Buckingham Palace in order to in order to secure loans. So the question is, what sorts of things has he violated the statutes by inflating the values, and what what this all means going forward. It's so unusual, as are so many other things with him. And we run into this problem, and people say it's unprecedented. We've never done this to a presidential candidate. Well, a presidential candidate has never been as deeply involved in such questionable business deals either.
So what happens if he can't pay?
That's a good question. What happens if he can't pay? My understanding, and I'm a historian, and I will say that my opinions are my own and not those of the Army War College or the U.S. Army. But if he is responsible for, he can of course appeal the amounts. But in order to make the appeal, he has to put up a bond for the equivalent value, which has to be kept in escrow. So basically, he'll have to find someone to front him. If he doesn't have the money, have someone to front him at least until he can go through his appeals to see what the final amounts he has to pay would be.
Which is the interesting thing, isn't it? Because I think he's got 30 days to lodge an appeal in all of this. And he's obviously very, very likely to do that. And so we're going to end up with a lot of these court cases that are going to carry on. They're going to be in escrow themselves, if you like, all these court cases, for months, possibly years. So it could all, in effect, it could disappear, couldn't it, or fail to reach a final conclusion before the election?
Some of these cases certainly could. This one in New York State is complicated because it's a state and not a federal case, and it's a civil, not a criminal trial. But some of the other cases that are federal, basically a President Trump could order the Justice Department to simply drop them. Which is also an unusual situation to be in. The long-term question about how he deals with New York, that even as president, he would have a hard time getting out from underneath this, unless he succeeds on his legal appeals.
Well, OK. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says people are now ready to put their faith in a changed Labour Party following a double win in Wellingborough and Kingswood by-elections.
Well, the Prime Minister says the circumstances facing the Tories are challenging, but insists Labour doesn't have a plan.
Midterm by-elections are always difficult for incumbent governments, and the circumstances of these by-elections were, of course, particularly challenging. Now, I think if you look at the results, very low turnout, and it shows that we've got work to do to show people that we are delivering on their priorities, and that's what I'm absolutely determined to do, but also shows that there isn't a huge amount of enthusiasm for the alternative in Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, and that's because they don't have a plan. And if you don't have a plan, you can't deliver real change. And when the general election comes, that's the message I'll be making to the country. Stick with our plan, because it is starting to deliver the change that the country wants and needs.
Challenging. That's understating it, I would have thought. Right, joining us now is our reporter Adam Cherry, joining us from Wellingborough. Good morning, Adam. What is the mood like in Wellingborough this morning?
Morning, guys. Yeah, the mood in Wellingborough, it seems to me it's a plague on all your houses. So, of course, yeah, the result on Friday morning was a huge swing towards Labour from the Conservatives. But actually, if you look at the vote share, if you look at the votes in absolute terms, Labour, their votes staying relatively static compared to 2019. What's happened is that the Conservative Party have dropped precipitously. They have lost thousands of votes. And when you talk to the local people here, that is what the mood is similar. They say the Conservatives have lost our trust. Again, this seat has voted Conservative since 2005, so it's a huge change. And they say, we've had enough. We're not necessarily interested in what Keir Starmer says, sort of what reflecting what the Prime Minister said in that package, but the Conservatives have bombed it. So, yeah, the mood is apathetic. and Conservatives are going to have a lot of work to do if they want to turn things around here. Should say I'm actually from this constituency. I spent the first 20 or so years of my life here, so it's strange to be back and to see just how much things are changing in terms of the mood.
You see, what's going to be interesting then is whether that apathy can be overcome at the time of a general election. Because if it can't be, then actually what is the Prime Minister going to play for?
Well, that's it. And as I've been speaking to people here today and over the last few days, I've said, what can they do? What are you looking for? I said, there's a budget in a few weeks' time, the 6th of March. Is that going to, will the proposed tax cuts make any difference? And it doesn't seem to move the dial at all. No one's really interested. They're all a waste of time, the lot of them, is essentially what a lot of people are saying to me, is what one person in particular said to me just yesterday. So they are really running out of time. Prime Minister said midterm by-elections are very difficult. True, but this is an election year. This is not midterm. They don't have very much time at all, a matter of months, to overcome what is a consistent failure in these by-elections. We've had, I think, 10 now since 2019, and the Conservatives have only won 2 of them, so they are in serious trouble.
I don't think it really helped. I mean, what comments have people made about the fact that the Tory candidate was actually the former MP, Peter Bone's girlfriend, Helen Harrison, who actually seemed to go missing throughout most of the campaign?
That's right. Well, Peter Bone, an odd character, he does have his fans still here, and some of the local people have said he was poorly treated during this campaign. But it's right, a lot of other people have said this just stinks. It doesn't make sense that the man stands down and is immediately replaced by his girlfriend, and then we don't hear from her. In fact, the Conservative Party themselves at Central Office were very reluctant to come up here and campaign for Helen Harrison, I'm told, because it felt like the local association had made a mistake in selecting her in the first place. So that certainly didn't help, but I don't think it's the full story. I think regardless of the candidate, the Conservatives would have really struggled to overturn the decline narrative that has been building for the last couple of years.
OK. Adam Cherry, thanks very much. It's overcast there in Wellingborough. Let's see what the weather's like right across the country with Annie.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. There will be some heavy rain through this afternoon and the evening, but there will also be some dry spells this weekend, and it is staying very mild. So it is a mild start out there. There is some mist and fog across eastern areas. That should lift and clear to leave some sunshine across eastern areas, particularly through today. It should stay largely dry through much of the morning and into the afternoon here as well. However, across the west, we'll see drizzly rain, particularly across the coast and the hills, and then some quite heavy rain arriving later on into parts of Northern Ireland and parts of West Wales and Western Scotland as well. But it will be feeling very mild once again, particularly in any of the sunshine in the east. As that band of very heavy rain pushes eastwards, we will see some disruption to travel, some difficult driving conditions. So there is a weather warning in force for many areas of England and Wales, and that will push into the southeast by Sunday morning, leaving a much drier start behind it elsewhere in the country. However, there is some uncertainty with how quickly this rain will clear. So I would prepare for a bit of rain in the south and east to start on Sunday. Elsewhere, though, it will be a much drier picture by the morning, away from some heavier showers floating around across northern Scotland. So many areas will see sunny spells through the course of Sunday, fairly light winds as well. So it will feel very pleasant in the sunshine, still very mild air with us. So temperatures will be climbing to around 15 or 16 degrees in the south, which is very high for the time of year.
Excellent. Right now, OK, exciting time. It's time for the Great British Giveaway. And you could bank £18,000 in tax-free cash. Make sure you don't miss out. Here's how you do it.
Time is ticking on your chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash. That's like having an extra £1,500 each month for the next year. Listen to the moment we told Phil from West Yorkshire he'd won our last Great British Giveaway.
Hello? Phil, I've got some really good news for you. You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
You're joking. That's brilliant news.
For another chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, Text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 23rd of February. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Good luck.
Now, would you make your wedding guests pay for their own meal? Find out what people think about that one, because that's happening, actually, more and more often, believe it or not. We'll debate it in a couple of minutes.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Elon Musk has announced that the first patients to receive a groundbreaking brain implant from Neuralink is recovering well.
This is all a bit odd. The product, called Telepathy, uses a robot to surgically place a computer chip in a region of the brain that controls movement.
Yes, Elon Musk says that the first goal is to enable people to control a phone or a computer just by thinking. He says that initial tests show promising signs of brain activity, meaning that patients with paralysis could one day overcome their conditions.
Not sure about this one. Joining us to discuss this breakthrough is applied futurist Tom Cheesewright. Tom, this sounds, well, slightly terrifying.
I certainly think a lot of people will be thinking this is something out of a sci-fi horror rather than reality. But this is a technology that's been a long time coming. We've been developing direct brain-computer interfaces for a long time, mostly for the sort of therapeutic reasons that are the initial goal, at least, of Elon Musk's Neuralink, to allow people who are perhaps quadriplegic to have direct control via their brains of initially a smartphone and maybe ultimately artificial limbs or a wheelchair.
It does seem fascinating how quickly this technology is moving on. I saw demonstrations perhaps a year or two ago of people playing a very simple Pong game just by thinking, moving sort of one line on a screen up and down. This seems like potentially there has been a breakthrough that means far more complex things can be controlled just by thinking.
Well, there's lots of different aspects to this technology. The initial attempts to interface with the brain used actually quite thick prongs almost that went into the brain, and they were quite solid, and so if the brain moved, they could potentially cause damage.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
We should actually just carry on the conversation we were having in the break.
It's a little bit tongue-in-cheek.
Was it?
It was.
I was being serious. Any case, it's sort of continuing on a theme because it's a bride-to-be, and we were talking about marriage, has faced criticism after asking her guests to pay for the meals at her wedding.
Yeah, the invitation was shared on social media, and it said, "We invite you to eat with us, but ask for you to provide your own payment."
OK. Would you do this, though? Is it fair, given how expensive weddings are? Or is it just plain, well, what's the word? Rude, I think.
Well, let's talk to life transformation specialist Nicola Howard and chair yoga specialist Maria Jones. Good to see you both this morning. Nicola, let's start with you. What do you think?
I think 18 months ago, I would have called it rude. Given where we are now with the current climate, economics are as they do, weddings in themselves cost an insane amount. Literally, they are a house deposit or a wedding party. I'm personally plumping for a house deposit, and I wouldn't make my guests, but I would definitely feel we need to change up the way we do things, and asking for your payment is fine.
Does it depend on the circumstances? Because I don't know the details of this, Nicola, but if she's put a message out on social media, it would imply that she wants a lot of people to come, in which case, I guess, asking them to pay is not unreasonable.
I would agree with that observation. Again, I don't know the circumstances beyond she's asked. It could be that they want a massive wedding, their friends are all in, but they can't afford that. And these days, asking for help, there's no shame in asking for help, as far as I'm concerned.
Maria, coming to you on this, because, I mean, it's not like she's asking for help. She's asking that they pay for something she's invited them to. If she's desperate and she can't afford it, just cut your cloth and provide a small buffet. You don't have to spend a load of money.
I agree with that statement. The guests already pay a huge amount to travel, accommodation, outfits, etc. And therefore, it is unreasonable to ask them to cough up an additional amount of money for their meal, especially because it revolves around the time of work to get there, to be at the wedding in total, and that costs time and money.
But I mean, the thing, Maria, with this is, though, that if people don't want to pay, they don't need to go, do they? So people aren't obliged to pay. You just don't go.
I think that is the case, and then they are missing out on the opportunity to spend time with their friends and family who they invited at the wedding. At my wedding, we paid for them for 3 days in a row because it was held in Greece and they had to travel and stay there overnight. So we believed that it was our duty to feed them and water them for the time they were with us.
Nicola, I think one of the issues here, isn't it, is the fact that we all spend so much on weddings now. I mean, back in 1872, in the Dark Ages, when I got married, it literally was a few sarnies at a buffet. I mean, now people spend thousands of pounds on their weddings. Surely that's the problem here, not getting your mates to pay for it.
Yeah, I believe an average wedding costs £15,000. If you want to push the boat out, you could spend, as I said, a house deposit worth of money on a wedding. It is a hard one. I agree. I agree with everything you're saying, Marie, in terms of I feel you should support your friends. But these days, where all of us have got less money than we used to, I'm very, very torn on the fact that, yes, I believe that if you have friends and they want to succeed with you, then they should help.
Yeah, what about what would be wrong, Nicola, with a finger buffet?
Well, nothing, but then you have to hire the hall. And as soon as you mention the M or the W word, the costs go up by a third. I've actually got friends that were going to get married next year and they've cancelled the ceremony and they're going to elope because of the uncertainty of costs. And I have been deprived of going to their wedding because of the economy. I would very, very happily help them pay for it, but they didn't give me that option because, of course, they've obviously felt, no, it's rude to ask.
Would you, Maria, if you were asked to pay, Maria, would you pay?
I don't ever remember a wedding meal being actually nice, other than one time where they gave us fish and chips in the middle of the evening part, and another time when we had a takeaway type of stall at the side of the gardens where the wedding was held. So my opinion is that they should adjust the catering costs to their budget.
Well, I think that's a fair point all round. Nicola, Maria, thank you both very much indeed. Good to see you this morning.
Did you have quite a posh wedding?
No, a very small family wedding.
And would you have dreamt of asking people to pay?
No.
But?
No.
Why do I sense there's a but coming here?
No, but they had to pay for their own... Most people had to pay for their own accommodation. We covered some of it for some people.
Yeah.
But I do sort of think... I'm a cut-your-cloth sort of guy. And I don't think the whole big wedding thing, I don't get.
No, I just honestly don't have a problem. It's about you and your loved one and declaring your love for one another. It doesn't matter how much you spend on it.
It doesn't have to be huge. And if you've got a buffet afterwards, a load of Cornish pasties, what's wrong with that?
Cornish
do
pasty.
it on the cheap. Well, it's just we were talking about Cornish pasties.
Oh, yeah.
Let's just do it on the cheap if you have
Actually,
to.
one of those could have fed an entire congregation.
28 quid all in. There you go, you're sorted. All right, we've got the sport heading your way in just a moment. Morning, Aidan.
Good morning. We'll be reflecting on England's batting collapse in India, as well as looking ahead to 7 Premier League fixtures. Sad news, too, from the world of cycling as Sir Chris Hoy, I should say, reveals his cancer diagnosis.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
Can, do you find the Union flag, the Union Jack, divisive?
In some situation, but as Simon quite clearly stated, and I agree with everything that he says in regards that there's situation when people use it for ulterior motive to cause fear, alarm and distress. We saw that with the far right when they came up to saying protecting the Churchill statues and things of that nature. But largely on the large whole, even I wave the St. George's flag on a sporting occasion. And I don't see anything wrong in raising the Union Jack or the St. George's flag so long as the intention is correct. And as he says, Mr. Brockhurst, he served for the country and he should have every right to be proud of what he's done and the way that he wants to display it.
All right, Simon, what do you make of this kind of, I would argue it as like student social media-based politics, where you get these pillocks from the Green Party or whatever saying, oh, it's divisive and I can't believe it. It will be legal in this country to do... Do those people need to get out more? I was on the streets of Stratford earlier on, an incredibly diverse place, speaking to a massive range of people right across different age demographics. I couldn't find a single sausage who said to me that they thought that this guy from the Green Party was right.
He obviously has absolutely no attention from anybody, and this is his way of finding attention. Both Ken and myself, we both agree that nobody should use any symbol of national identity to offend others deliberately, because that's just inflaming a situation. There's so much sensitivity around so many things today, and people do get offended by so much so quickly without any rhyme or reason.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
8:38, morning to you. Aidan McGee's here with the sport and starting off with some sad news.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw Sir Chris Hoy, a very celebrated Olympian, 6 times gold medalist, of course. He revealed on Instagram yesterday that he is suffering from cancer. He was diagnosed last year. It's unspecified what type of cancer it is, so we're none the wiser on any kind of prognosis. But what caught my eye was the fact that he said that for the sake of my young family, I had hoped to keep this information private, but regrettably, our hand has been forced. And whilst I'm thankful for any support, I'd like to deal with this privately. Now, that suggests to me that there was a run on the story. Somebody wanted to break it, and he felt he had to jump the gun to reveal it, which is a little bit distressing from his point of view. He went on to say, though, he said, I'm optimistic, positive, and surrounded by love, for which I'm truly grateful. As you might imagine, the last few months have been incredibly difficult. However, I currently feel fine. And so there's a nice way of ending it. He obviously feels quite positive. You've got the Paris Olympics coming up later this summer, which he hopes to be involved with some of the analysis and the commentary. But just to look at his achievements, I mean, 1 silver medal in the Sydney Games. Across 4 games, don't forget. So there's a hell of a lot of longevity as well. 1 gold at Athens, 3 at Beijing, 2 golds most recently at London 2012. There were no symptoms as well of the cancer, which would have really spooked him, I imagine. But we'll keep an eye on his...
I'll tell you what, it's why these... these checks that people have.
Yes.
We just go like, I mean, I don't know your prostate cancer.
Yes.
For men is one of the checks, isn't it? But, women obviously have your smears and your breast cancer
Yeah,
checks.
but
But you've got to do, because you don't just...
No.
always know, do you?
Exactly. He's undergoing chemotherapy now as well.
Yeah, but he's still getting out on his bike.
Yes, he is
So he's
indeed.
still very positive.
Yeah,
I think
and
if
everyone
he's
here
positive,
at GB News...
Yeah,
wishes him
halfway there.
the very, very best in his recovery as well.
Is the West Ham manager David Moyes feeling positive this morning?
I wouldn't have thought so, Stephen, although they've conceded 9 goals in the last 2 games, 6 of them at home.
2?
Yes, 3 at Man United.
Your team's rubbish.
what do you know about football?
Nothing.
3 at Man United, 6 at home to Arsenal. I mean, this was about 5 weeks after they'd actually won away to Arsenal 2-0, and then fans are leaving the match at half-time, streaming out of the London Stadium.
I was here working. I didn't leave. I didn't go.
Would you have left, Dawn?
Well, I sent my niece. I gave my niece my season ticket, and she went with her boyfriend, who's a Gooner.
Oh, really?
So they had to sit next to each other in the West Ham end while 6 goals banged in.
Yeah.
My niece, I think she's threatened to sort of like leave him at the end of the match, but no, she stayed to the bitter end. To be fair play to her.
Well, they haven't won. They haven't won in 7 games. They travelled to Nottingham Forest today, Stephen, and I wouldn't call it a 6-pointer because West Ham are in the top half of the table, and it just shows how reactive these clubs are. I mean, he's under pressure, having won a European trophy last summer.
Yes.
They've had some big wins this season. They've beaten Arsenal twice already, and notwithstanding last weekend's result, they beat Man United at home. I saw them win at Tottenham, and they've had, generally speaking, they've been pretty good. And they're 8th in the table, Stephen. This is West Ham. They're not somebody who's going to trouble the Champions League spots generally. And then you've got Crystal Palace at the other end of the table, 5 points above the bottom 3. Still relatively early in the season. Roy Hodgson, though, took ill yesterday in training before the press conference. And again, what kind of pressure must he have been on, given that he probably knew he was going to be sacked this weekend, come what may. They're playing against Everton on Monday. Oliver Glasner was due to come in, the former Eintracht Frankfurt coach, to replace him. And then he takes it ill before the press conference yesterday. I must admit, I was very cynical about that beforehand, and then it actually turns out he is in hospital. He's undergoing treatment.
They're not going to sack him in hospital, are they, Aidan?
Well, I don't know. I mean, look, stranger things have happened. I mean, Sam Allardyce was once sacked by his chairman, Owen Oyston, while he was in prison, while Owen Oyston was in prison. So, I know, so it does happen in football. Football's it's a crazy world, as we know.
Just a quick word on the cricket, if you can bear it.
Yeah, 319 all out. I mean, look, there was hope going into England's period in the bat, but Stokes and Folkes were out with consecutive balls, and that was after Ben Duckett had raised 156, and they're 126 behind after the first innings now, Stephen. It's a hell of a chase now to get that, to win the second, or the third test, rather.
Yeah, OK. Aidan, thank you very much indeed.
Good to see you.
Right, don't go anywhere. Should parents, we're asking, ban children from using smartphones? It's one of the stories in the papers that we're going to be looking at very shortly.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney. Weekdays from 3 p.m.
Or they're trying to make it better, or they're trying to make it slower, a lot slower. Slower enough, in fact, for it to sufficiently allow the boats to start coming in to cause further political damage to Rishi Sunak.
Which it will do if it carries
Of course it will. And this is the Labour peers, the Lib Dem peers, and no doubt some of the Conservative wets, banding together, causing political damage to Rishi Sunak. And the longer it goes on, the worse it will be for the Conservative Party.
There's now a deadline on the Rwanda plan. It's got to start working this summer to have any electoral benefit for Rishi Sunak, because of course if the election is in November, by then the costings will slow down. It's got to be up and running by about May or June, and then they'll take it from there.
Cool. And you have a crumb of comfort for us. Rishi Sunak met a Prime Minister.
Well, a crumb of comfort for those who want to stop the boat, certainly, or we'll get towards it. The PM today met Alexander De Croo, who's a Belgian Prime Minister. They've agreed a UK-Belgium law enforcement cooperation agreement. In short, that is a focus on surveillance and information ultimately, which should help stop the boats. Not many boats make crossings from Belgium, but it's a kind of, they can hopefully use law enforcement. These are the kind of deals which Sir Keir Starmer's talking about. If he becomes Prime Minister, he'll do more of these deals with countries on the continent, and this shows that the Tory PM can do them too.
And there may be intelligence sharing of crime gangs that operate within Belgium. As you say, it's a much, much further distance, much more perilous across the North Sea. Very unlikely that people will be leaving in any great numbers from Belgium. But nevertheless, is this of note, or is it a token victory against the backdrop of domestic loss?
They could do it with Belgium and not do it with the European Union, because so far we've been told the returns agreements can't be agreed with individual countries because they've got the European Union to talk to. Maybe this deal can be mirrored with France, and that might help with better cooperation, because basically after Brexit we're a sovereign country. We have to work on some areas more closely with our European neighbours.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
8:45. Let's see what's in the papers this morning with the parliamentary sketch writer at The Telegraph, Madeline Grant, and showbiz reporter Stephanie Tecci. Good morning, ladies. This is a serious one in the Mail, Madeline, to begin with. All these claims of anti-Semitism at the BBC.
Yes, I mean, the BBC has had a really torrid time in terms of the amount of criticism they've been getting ever since October the 7th. They've had to reprimand various employees, and more recently, actually, an investigation by the newspaper I work for, The Telegraph, found that a number of the BBC Arabic employees had made some terrible remarks around the time of October the 7th, and they were still working and they hadn't been sacked or anything like this. We're talking truly abhorrent things. And now they have put out, the Director General, Tim Davies, put out a statement saying that they have been alerted to even more anti-Semitic behaviour and saying there was no place at the BBC for this kind of behaviour. And, it's quite a frank acknowledgement that there is a serious problem there, that we haven't had such an acknowledgement from them so explicitly.
What is very odd is BBC sort of woke central in a lot of ways, which makes it very surprising. But then there's always this strange correlation somehow between the left in politics and anti-Semitism. And obviously Keir Starmer is desperately trying to shift, but that exists as well, which is very strange, I think.
Yes, it's a very odd sort of unholy alliance in this country between the very crank parts of the far left and the kind of Islamist variety of anti-Semitism. But it is pretty bonkers because you may see people, like very left-wing people out on marches, basically excusing an organisation like Hamas, which, as we know, would persecute gay people and many, all the causes they claim to support elsewhere, they seem to not really care about when it comes to Israel and Hamas.
I'm constantly surprised that, the three young women that had the paragliders on their clothing. It's like, young women, do you know what would happen to you if you were under Hamas's rule, by the way?
Unbelievable.
But it's good Tim Davie put in an email like this, but what action is actually going to be taken? Like, how do you deal with people who have these thoughts and beliefs and opinions when they're workers in your organisation? It's
whether they do anything about it.
Yeah. And it's like, how do you do that? I've worked at the BBC before, and I know that they're quite strict on what you put out on social media, so it's quite brave of these people to be making such anti-Semitic comments.
Stupid.
But I think most organisations now are going to have to really check themselves and their employees who do have these kind of thoughts.
Talking of social media and smartphones, Stephanie, this is a story you found in The Guardian.
So 4,000 parents and growing have joined this WhatsApp group, which was initially set up by just two friends, and they only had a couple of their friends on it. It's called the Smartphone phone-free childhood. And the reason they've set it up is because they're really campaigning, and they hope it turns out into a national campaign, for children not to have smartphones until they're at least 14 and not have social media access until they're 16 years old. The reason why they've set this WhatsApp group, they've just said, you know, let children be children. They shouldn't be having this life of time of scrolling and also accessing content which is quite detrimental to their health. And I totally agree with it. I think, you know, you should at least give children a chance not to be glued to smartphones and to, you know, let their imagination run free. So I think it's quite bold that these parents are doing it. But then also it means that these parents need to provide entertainment and stuff that will stimulate their children, because I know there's also other parents who give their children laptops, iPads as a way to distract them so they don't have to entertain them.
I tell you, Madeleine, isn't this genie out of the bottle? The amount of times I've seen sort of like, you know, adults completely ignoring children, and the children are on their phone, the adults are on their phone.
Oh, absolutely.
And you actually see a parent reading a book with a child, it's like, oh, my God.
Oh, my God, yes, it's true. The other day I was on the train and I saw a dad and his 2 kids, and he was reading them a book. They were good as gold. They were quiet all the way to... And I was so impressed, because you don't see that
But the fact you're
very much.
shocked by it.
I know. And I know what you mean about the genie being out of the bottle. And the difficulty is, children obviously look at their parents and copy what they do. Many parents are themselves addicted to their smartphones, or else they have the kind of job where you have to be constantly on call, constantly responsive to stuff. But maybe people should be... I mean, I think Stephanie makes a really good point that if there were greater awareness around this, if it were... we talked about it more, parents might think twice before just mindlessly scrolling in front of their kids.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, you've got to ban... You definitely... If you're going to stop it, you've got to ban it across the country.
Yeah.
Although then their kids don't feel like they're missing out. Whereas if they make them a smartphone, then the whole thing falls apart. Madeleine, The Times is asking, does Sunak care?
Well,
I think he does.
Yes.
About the election result.
Well, he's trying to act like, oh, it's no biggie. You know, we have these sorts of challenges, as Dawn was saying earlier, which is politicians never have problems anymore. It's always challenges. Or issues is another favourite. But this is interesting analysis from John Curtis, the pollster, and he's basically pointing out, obviously, you know, this has been a very, very disappointing 48 hours for the Tories, though perhaps not a surprising one. But the bigger point here is that the party hasn't really seen any big change in the polling since Rishi Sunak came in, which suggests that nothing much that he tries to do, none of his stated announcements or tax cuts or anything like this seems to be making a real dent into the polling. And it kind of reminds me of that famous comment that Jim Callaghan made when Margaret Thatcher came in, that sometimes there is a sea change in politics and that's just the way it's going to go. And it's really, it comes a point where the incumbent party, what they do, doesn't really matter anymore, and it feels like that's where we are now.
It actually does feel like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
At the moment. What do you make of Reform in all of this? How they performed?
Well, they did very well, and you know, the fact that they've leapfrogged the Lib Dems is interesting, because if they can set themselves up as the place that you go for a sort of protest or a disaffected vote, that's interesting. And although Tory strategists are keen to kind of point out that they don't own everyone that votes for Reform and that these are not necessarily left-wing people, sorry, right conservative people, it is interesting that the votes combined in Wellingborough, I think, or is it...
No, Kingswood.
Kingswood, sorry, yes, you're right. That collectively would have beaten the Labour Party, so that obviously this is going to dig into there. And then it could be even worse if Nigel Farage decides to go for it, because that would make things even more dangerous for the Tories.
But do you think it's fair that Rishi takes the blame for the failings of the Conservatives? Because he's only been in power, over a year? And we've had a Conservative government for over 13 years. So isn't this just a collective of failings of the Conservatives?
He was Chancellor, though, beforehand, wasn't he?
No, but that's a really, really good point, and I agree. And actually, if you look at the polling, where things really dipped never to return was Liz Truss, actually. It seems like they could never recover from that particular... I mean, the trouble is that Rishi Sunak was very keen to pick up that poison chalice. Many people would have said, this is I might just wait around and bide my time and let someone else take the flak.
Politicians for you, they all want the top job.
They do, they do.
Let's just very quickly, Stephanie, have a look at the Bee Gees movie in the Times.
Yes, I do like a biopic, and it seems like in Hollywood there's this big trend of bringing musician stories to life, and the Bee Gees now, we're set to see their story come on to the big screen, and it's set to be directed by Sir Ridley Scott. He's been working on it for a few years with Barry Gibb, who will be an executive producer on it. No cast have been announced at the moment, but I think it'll be quite an interesting story because they did have quite high highs and lows during the 70s when it was all about discos. They were really at the height of their fame, but then, you know, when I was reading today, they said at the end of the 70s, when disco fell out of favour, it was like they almost were getting criticised everywhere and even facing bomb threats.
What?
And they were trying, yeah. So this is why I think it'll be an interesting story, and they have an amazing catalogue of music as well.
It's
Saturday Night Fever.
It's
So good, Eva.
I was friends with Robin Gibb.
Really?
And to go around his, about a year ago, I went back to his house to see Dweena, his widow, and to go through their house and all the stuff and the records on the wall and all that is phenomenal. There's a great exhibition actually in Thames.
Amazing.
Tame, I should say. There's a permanent Robin Gibb museum there now.
Lovely.
It's lovely. It's well worth seeing.
Tragic family story.
Oh, well, that's what I was just about to say.
Yeah. Anyway, we're out of time. Good to see you both this morning.
Thank you so much.
Very much indeed. Here's your weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. There will be some heavy rain through this afternoon and the evening, but there will also be some drier spells this weekend, and it is staying very mild. So it is a mild start out there. There is some mist and fog across eastern areas. That should lift and clear to leave some sunshine across eastern areas, particularly through today. It should stay largely dry through much of the morning and into the afternoon here as well. However, across the west, we'll see drizzly rain, particularly across the coasts and the hills, and then some quite heavy rain arriving later on into parts of Northern Ireland and parts of West Wales and Western Scotland as well. But it will be feeling very mild once again, particularly in any of the sunshine in the east. As that band of very heavy rain pushes eastwards, we will see some disruption to travel, some difficult driving conditions. So there is a weather warning in force for many areas of England and Wales, and that will push into the southeast by Sunday morning, leaving a much drier start behind it elsewhere in the country. However, there is some uncertainty with how quickly this rain will clear, so I would prepare for a bit of rain in the south and east to start on Sunday. Elsewhere, though, it will be a much drier picture by the morning, away from some heavier showers floating around across northern Scotland. So many areas will see sunny spells through the course of Sunday, fairly light winds as well, so it will feel very pleasant in the sunshine. Still very mild air with us, so temperatures will be climbing to around 15 or 16 degrees in the south, which is very high for the time of year.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right.
Growth.
And then people, you know, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, you know, one year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock on Saturday, the 17th of February. Today.
Make no mistake, Putin is responsible for Navalny's death. Putin is responsible.
Vladimir Putin must pay. World leaders speak out against the Russian regime following the death of opposition leader Alexei Navalny.
James, that's another case altogether. She's a horribly corrupt attorney general, and it's all having to do with election interference.
No one is above the law. A New York court orders Donald Trump to pay around £280 million in his civil fraud trial, with the former president describing it as a witch hunt.
Prince Harry is reportedly willing to take on a temporary royal role amid his father's cancer diagnosis.
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is under pressure from his party to turn the Tories' fortunes round following a double by-election defeat.
Good morning. There's a mixed picture out there for many of us this weekend. Some heavy rain to come, but also some spring-like sunshine. Find out all the details with me a little later on.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is Breakfast on GB News on your Saturday morning.
Loads of you getting in touch on weddings, if you had to pay.
It's a very, very popular subject, this one, yeah.
Amanda says, I would decline any invitation where I was asked to pay. I won't even go to a wedding if there's a gift list included.
Well, I mean, it's exactly... A lot of people are saying the same. I mean, Gary in Upper Basildon... Hi, Gary. He said, if I was asked to pay for my own food, there would be short of at least one guest. It's outrageous.
Colin in Crewe says you shouldn't plan a lavish wedding if you can't afford it. Though Phil says, pay for the meal, but don't buy a present.
And
that's fair enough.
Well, yeah,
that's
I mean,
fair enough.
I'm with Eunice in Saxmundham on this one. Hello, Eunice. Hope you're having a lovely weekend. Why do weddings have to cost so much? These days, it's all about the wedding, not the marriage.
Yes,
I'm
I agree
team
with
Eunice
that.
on that one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where things are going wrong today. Barbara says, about 40 years ago, my friend had a wedding in a castle.
Ooh.
She laid a white cloth on the huge table and asked each guest to bring a dessert or a main that they'd made themselves. Worked out well.
I tried to think, if I'd have asked my mates to do that, I tried to think what would have ended up to eat, to be honest with you. Not exactly great, chef. Meanwhile, Nick says, oh, I love this. It cost us £500 for our wedding 43 years ago. Well done, you. And he says, I was pushed down the aisle in a wheelchair. Bless you. Well, happy anniversary coming up, I'm assuming, there, for 44 years coming up. Wow, congratulations.
Yeah. What's that, 1981?
Yeah.
There you go. Well done, you.
You had to do the maths on there.
Well, I was trying to work out what 500 quid was worth then.
Oh.
But anyway. Now, leaders from around the world have reacted to the news that the Russian opposition leader, Alexei Navalny, has died in prison.
Reports of his death, if they're true, and I have no reason to believe they're not, Russian authorities are going to tell their own story. But make no mistake, Putin is responsible for Navalny's death. Putin is responsible.
Navalny was serving a 19-year-old prison sentence after being convicted of extremism and fraud following his vocal opposition to Vladimir Putin's regime.
Well, the prison service said he collapsed and lost consciousness during a walk. His widow, Yulia, says the world needs to punish Putin.
I want to call on the entire world community, everyone in this room and people around the world, that we come together to unite and defeat this evil, defeat the horrific regime that is now in Russia.
Ooh, OK.
Well, let's talk to former advisor to Vladimir Putin, Sergei Markov. Good to see you this morning, Mr. Markov. Is this something for which Putin was responsible, do you think?
Good morning. You know, it's a pity, bad news, of course, about death of Alexei Navalny. I knew Alexei Navalny personally. He was very bright, well-educated, very modern style political leader. 11 years ago. 10 years ago, after Crimea joined Russia, and Alexei Navalny been one of the few Russian politicians who did not support Crimea joining Russia, he finished as political leader. That's why Western leaders now claim him as a main opposition leader, their ally. He lost his popularity 10 years ago when Alexei Navalny supported not Crimean people rejoining Russia, but Ukrainian, Russophobic and repressive regime. So politically, Navalny dead 10 years ago. And if you, a lot of people now blame Vladimir Putin, but let's look on this issue from criminal logic. Criminal. Look, imagine that if you're criminal and you have some courtesies in prison of your enemies, you really will kill your enemy 1 month before the very important events. It means that in 1 month from now exactly will be presidential election on which Vladimir Putin, according to the sociology, should get about 75% of popular support in first round. So, of course, it's irrational behavior. And for sure, for Vladimir Putin also it was bad news. Vladimir Putin didn't respect Alexei Navalny for sure. He regarded Alexei Navalny as betrayal and weaponry in the hands of the enemies of Russia. But he doesn't like it because the time is very bad for Russian authorities.
So, Sergei, you are saying that the world media and other world leaders have got this wrong and Putin is nothing to do with the death?
Yes, Putin has nothing to do because, you know, Alexei Navalny was not only political leader 10, 11, 12 years ago, but also he was corrupted because he served as advisor to one of the Russian governor. And this governor, by the way, already also stayed 8 years in prison. And I think low-level officers of the prison mostly responsible for the bad conditions, because I think the behavior of these low-level security officers was not good. Navalny spent many time in the bad conditions because he had been punished. It's apples of polar circle. It's quite bad conditions for everybody to stay there.
Well, yeah, look, why wouldn't people believe that Putin was behind this when Putin was clearly behind his conviction in the first place? I mean, it's frankly a ridiculous conviction that he was serving.
You know, a lot of accusation about Putin. They tried to poison Alexei Navalny a few years ago, but I think it's same line demonization of Vladimir Putin. For Western leader, it's much more better not to draw Vladimir Putin as a devil, as Hitler, as those who should be crushed, killed, and so on. But better to recognize Russian interests and to come to compromise. Vladimir Putin, very, very humanitarian, I would say, politician. he, for example, violated Russian law to save life of Alexei Navalny after this crisis of his poisoning. With violation of Russian law, Alexei Navalny have been moved in few hours to the Germany to save his life. So Vladimir Putin tried to save life of Alexei Navalny.
Look, there's an entire population of Ukraine, never mind the rest of the world, that would take a real point with you saying that Vladimir Putin is a humanitarian politician.
Yeah, first of all, I should repeat again. For us, Ukrainians, they are Russians. They, in all their history, they are Russians. They speak Russian language. They call themselves 1,000 years as Russians in all history documents. That's why, for us, it's not taking control of Ukraine. It's liberation of Ukrainian people from anti-Russian Russophobic regime. That's why clear, absolutely clear order of Vladimir Putin to save a life of civilians in Ukrainian cities as much as possible. If you see some information about the Russian army kill Ukrainian civilians, you should know that this is just propaganda, military propaganda and lie. I can again appeal to the Western public opinion leaders. Don't make image of Vladimir Putin as Hitler and as a devil, but respect Russian interests, stop the war in Ukraine by lives of Ukrainian people, and stop this war as soon as possible.
So, Sergei, we have got this wrong, and we owe Putin an apology for even thinking that he is anything but a humanitarian and had nothing to do with this death.
I don't got your question. Can you repeat?
So you are saying that the world owes Putin an apology for even thinking that he had any responsibility for this death?
Yeah. Not the world. The most of the world believes that Vladimir Putin not responsible. China, India, Brazil, all Arabic world, all Muslim world, all of these countries a little bit more support Russia than Western coalition. But Western coalition, NATO countries, they blame Putin. And I should say, NATO having war against Russia. And all this falsified information is just part of the military propaganda. You know how military propaganda works? It's based on the lie. It's exactly what I appeal to the Western public opinion. Stop war against Russia, stop military propaganda, stop demonizing. But most of the world believes that this is war between two Western coalitions. One, Europe, United States, another Russia. Because for the China and for the India, both Russians, British, Germans, and Americans, they same white imperialists.
OK, Sergei Markov, we've got to leave it there. Appreciate your perspective on that. Thanks very much indeed. We do know that certainly there are plenty of people in Russia who think that they are in fact being invaded by the West as a result of all of this.
Yes.
We've heard plenty of tales that indeed Ukrainian people who said they've spoken to their relatives in Russia who cannot believe, they do not believe what is happening because they say the Russian troops are just defending their borders. That's what Sergei Markov had to say. What's your... do you believe him or not?
Humanitarian.
Putin as a humanitarian politician is hard to believe. But anyway, it's about hearing the perspectives, isn't it? Meanwhile, let's have a look back with our security editor, Mark White, at Alexei Navalny, who the man was and what we believe may have happened to him.
By far Vladimir Putin's most high-profile political opponent, Alexei Navalny remained defiant to the last, an outspoken critic of the Kremlin who refused to remain silent even after his conviction on criminal charges, which his supporters say were politically motivated. And now those same supporters say Putin's regime is the prime suspect in the unexplained death of the opposition politician. Friends, family and his legal team suggested he may have been the victim of poisoning, a deliberate attempt by Russian authorities to silence him. The government in Moscow has dismissed any such suggestion, but for Navalny, it wouldn't be the first time he'd fallen victim to a poisoning attempt. In the summer of 2020, he fell violently ill aboard a passenger plane while on a trip to Siberia. He was flown to Germany and treated by doctors there, who concluded he'd been poisoned by Novichok. The same nerve agent was used against former Russian spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia in Salisbury in 2018. The Kremlin stands accused of regularly using poison as a means of targeting outspoken critics of the regime or perceived traitors to the Russian state. In 2006, in one of the most high-profile incidents, Kremlin critic Alexander Litvinenko was poisoned with the radioactive isotope polonium-210. He suffered an agonising few days before dying in a central London hospital.
A new opposition is appearing. It is being generated now. And Navalny played an important role in it. But at the same time, this opposition requires new ideology.
The death of Alexei Navalny means Vladimir Putin now rules virtually unchallenged. Many of the critical voices who once spoke out against the Russian leader, now jailed, forced into exile, or like Navalny, are dead. By the time he launched his full-scale invasion of Ukraine, many opponents who once tried to hold the Putin government to account have been silenced. There is widespread and understandable concern at the news of Alexei Navalny's death, but getting proper answers about the cause of death will be next to impossible. Like so many similar incidents in the past, the Kremlin will simply insist any allegations of foul play are far-fetched. Mark White, GB News.
Right, OK, well...
This is you.
Yes, I know. Just trying to digest all that and the interview with just... but you can catch up on all that on the website and on social media as well. Now, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says people are now ready to put their faith in a changed Labour Party following a double win in Wellingborough and Kingswood by-elections yesterday.
Now, the Prime Minister says the circumstances facing the Tories are challenging, but insists Labour just doesn't have a plan.
Midterm by-elections are always difficult for incumbent governments, and the circumstances of these by-elections were, of course, particularly challenging. Now, I think if you look at the results, very low turnout, and it shows that we've got work to do to show people that we are delivering on their priorities, and that's what I'm absolutely determined to do, but also shows that there isn't a huge amount of enthusiasm for the alternative in Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, and that's because they don't have a plan. And if you don't have a plan, you can't deliver real change. And when the general election comes, that's the message I'll be making to the country. Stick with our plan, because it is starting to deliver the change that the country wants and needs.
Let's talk to Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde, Sir John Curtis. Sir John, always good to see you. Look, we do this every single time there's a by-election, don't we? Is we try to extrapolate, we try to work out what this all means for the national picture. Can we do that in this case or not?
Well, it shouldn't be done in isolation, and it needs to be done with care. In particular, what we should be doing is comparing by-elections with by-elections, then looking at what has followed in the wake of different kinds of by-election results. Be aware that history isn't guaranteed to repeat itself, and then, draw a measured conclusion. So the government, way back now at 10 o'clock on Thursday, the Conservative Party at least, issued a statement saying, well, governments always lose by-elections and we shouldn't be surprised. Well, it's true that often voters will use by-elections as a means of protesting against the government, particularly if they're unhappy with it. But that doesn't mean to say that the government necessarily loses every by-election. And the truth is, if you look at the record of this government in by-elections and compare the historical precedents, it's very clear that these two results, in combination with other results in this Parliament, give the Conservatives reason for worry. Number one, this government now has lost 9 by-elections during this parliament, although it did gain Hartlepool, so a net loss of 8. The last time that we saw a government lose by-elections with that degree of regularity is the Parliament of 1992 to 1997. Equally, while yes, voters may use by-elections to protest against the government, they don't necessarily defect from the government on the scale that we saw either last night or in the back end of last year. I mean, particularly above all in Wellingborough, where the fall in the Conservative vote is the biggest fall in the Conservative vote the Conservatives have suffered in a by-election, albeit, sure, partly perhaps exacerbated by local circumstances. When was the last time that we saw governments regularly using by-elections with swings of around 20 points or so? Well, again, it's the 92 to 97 Parliament. So that's what I think one certainly can conclude quite reasonably, given also the evidence of the opinion polls, is that if the Conservatives are going to turn things around between now and polling day, what Rishi Sunak will have to do is to achieve what John Major was not able to do, which is to turn around in the last 9 or 10 months of this parliament a situation in which the Conservatives are seemingly heading for potentially quite a serious defeat.
And John, how worried should they be about the performance of the Reform Party?
Well, the truth is that one of the messages of the opinion polls in the last 2 or 3 months, and it's underlined by these 2 by-elections, is that the Conservatives are now facing competition for the loyalty of those who voted for them in 2019, not from one front, i.e. Labour, but from 2 fronts, Labour and Reform. The opinion polls on average have been showing for the last 2 or 3 months that for every one person who switched from Conservative to Labour, there is one switching from Conservative to Reform. Now, the Prime Minister can quite reasonably argue, and I've indeed argued some of this in what I've written in the wake of these by-elections, that the level of enthusiasm for Labour is at least not as great as the level of dissatisfaction with the Conservatives. That level of dissatisfaction is rather high. And to that extent, at least, yes, you can argue that, people aren't necessarily, even if they want change, they don't necessarily want Sir Keir Starmer's change. However, it does mean that the Conservatives now have to work out not only how to get votes back from Labour, but also how to get votes back from Reform. And of course, how you achieve those 2 things may require somewhat different and occasionally perhaps contradictory strategies. So to that extent, at least, the maze through which the Prime Minister is trying to negotiate has just got that more complicated in the wake of these 2 by-elections.
Yeah, hasn't it just? Sir John, as always, really good to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed.
Right, should we have a look at the weather?
Oh, I think we better have.
I think we should, yeah. Let's find out.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. There will be some heavy rain through this afternoon and the evening, but there will also be some dry spells this weekend, and it is staying very mild. So it is a mild start out there. There is some mist and fog across eastern areas. That should lift and clear to leave some sunshine across eastern areas, particularly through today. It should stay largely dry through much of the morning and into the afternoon here as well. However, across the west, we'll see drizzly rain, particularly across the coast and the hills, and then some quite heavy rain arriving later on into parts of Northern Ireland and parts of West Wales and Western Scotland as well. But it will be feeling very mild once again, particularly in any of the sunshine in the east. As that band of very heavy rain pushes eastwards, we will see some disruption to travel, some difficult driving conditions. So there is a weather warning in force for many areas of England and Wales, and that will push into the southeast by Sunday morning, leaving a much drier start behind it elsewhere in the country. However, there is some uncertainty with how quickly this rain will clear. So I would prepare for a bit of rain in the south and east to start on Sunday. Elsewhere, though, it will be a much drier picture by the morning, away from some heavier showers floating around across northern Scotland. So many areas will see sunny spells through the course of Sunday, fairly light winds as well. So it will feel very pleasant in the sunshine, still very mild air with us. So temperatures will be climbing to around 15 or 16 degrees in the south, which is very high for the time of year.
Right, it's time for the Great British Giveaway, and you could win £18,000 in totally tax-free cash to spend, well, however you like. Do you want to make it yours? Here's how you could do it.
We want to turn 2024 into 2020 more with your chance to win £18,000 in cash to spend however you like. You really could be the next big winner of our Great British Giveaway. Phil from West Yorkshire won our last one. Listen to his reaction when we gave him the news.
I never won a penny in my life.
Well, congratulations, you've won £10,000.
Oh my God, wow.
For your chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 23rd of February. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Good luck.
I could do with a bit of that, couldn't you?
It'd be nice. We can't enter.
We're not entering. We're not allowed to enter.
No.
So let's go up to, well, where should we go now? Scotland, do you reckon?
Well, we will in a minute.
Oh.
We will in a minute.
Oh, right.
We'll talk to Tony Maguire, who's going to have all the latest on the ongoing Scottish Labour conference.
See, that's
in
Scotland.
Glasgow.
That's in Scotland.
It
Scotland,
is,
yeah.
but
that's next. Meanwhile, this is GB News Breakfast with Stephen and Dawn.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
The EU rules are trying to choke even that.
Yeah.
And I just think, I would join this protest in a heartbeat. And you are right to point out this stuff about them being right-wing. How dare they slate them as right-wing when these are real people whose livelihoods
And
are
remember,
being
a lot of
trashed.
people who work in the farm industry, Malone, they get paid very little money.
They get paid,
Agricultural workers are very badly paid.
They get paid nothing, Piers. And, the profits... I think on Clarkins Farm, I read somewhere that I saw that when you sell it like a sheep's skin, it's 30 pence or something.
Right.
And you say, what?
Yeah.
And so you wonder how they can manage that. And I think after a year, Clarkson made a handful of pounds.
He made like 90 quid profit or something.
In a whole year of working.
But Carol makes a really good point there, doesn't she, Nikki, about this idea that we go to the supermarkets, we shop there, we eat our food, we don't often give it a thing. And the farmers have become so frustrated by this idea that they are not respected.
Absolutely. I mean, they're running what are effectively small businesses, often family businesses that have been passed down through generations. They also tend to know the land and the animals better than anyone else in those areas. I'm all for green protests, I'm all for climate change activism, but actually... the only way you can do that is gradually. It's exactly what we've seen with Port Talbot. You can't just go in and say, you're not going to do it anymore this way. You've got to do it this way instead.
The Tata Steel thing.
Yes, exactly. You've got to do it this way instead. Lots of farmers are on board with protecting the planet, but they can't do it overnight. You've got to give them time.
Yeah.
So they're protesting, they're saying no farmers, no food.
When
well,
you say
can't
you
get any more
support some of
obvious.
these environmental protests, you're not one of these closet supporters of Just Stop Oil, are you?
I'm not a closet supporter. I think I've been quite open about Just Stop Oil.
No.
I don't like all their methods, but I do like the
like
message.
any of them.
But I do appreciate the
any of
message.
them.
Yeah, but sometimes you've got to do difficult things.
What they're asking for now, those protesters, are unrealistic. What these protesters are asking for is not unrealistic.
No.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Now, at 9:27, the Labour Party is still celebrating that double by-election win for Wellingborough and Kingswood.
That's as the Scottish Labour conference is underway, where its leader, Anna Sawar, has pledged to deliver on people's aspirations and dreams if his party came to power.
Well, let's talk to our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire. I mean, certainly they're going to have the sort of wind beneath their wings with this conference a little bit, Tony.
Yes, good morning. I am indeed in Glasgow on the Clyde here, and behind me you can see the Clydeside venue for this year's Scottish Labour Conference. And it is, as you say, they were definitely riding on those by-election victories here yesterday as Anas Sarwar delivered his 70-minute mammoth speech. Now, delegates will still be digesting that this morning and all that he had to fling at them for his visions of a post-SNP Scotland and a post-Conservative Britain. Now, among the things that he wanted to explain to delegates were his plans for Ian Murray when he steps into that role of Secretary of State for Scotland, and how he's going to handle brand Scotland in terms of making Scotland more of a power player on the world stage. And of course, the ongoing fighting in Gaza, he had some quite strong words about his opposition to any side of violence. Now, this is after the SNP are planning to push through yet another vote in the Commons next week to oppose or stand against a ceasefire vote. That is coming from Stephen Flynn at the SNP, and it seems to be that they're Keir Starmer and Anas Sarwar still can't work out the semantics and the language, but we'll certainly see more of that in the days to come.
OK, Tony, for now, thanks very much indeed. Well, also joining us now following yesterday's big win for the Labour Party is Shadow Minister Toby Perkins. Good to see you, Mr Perkins, this morning. Can Labour afford to rest on its laurels after this win? I mean, clearly it's important, clearly it's significant, but it comes at the end of a week where actually it's been pretty tumultuous for the Labour Party.
Well, I mean, it's right that it's given us a huge boost. It's been a very tough week, and so it was a really great result for us. It was the biggest election victory in this Parliament, biggest swing, the second biggest in history. So all of that's fantastic. You're absolutely right. We can't rest on our laurels at all. It's a huge amount still to do to move from the stage of being a very serious opposition who clearly are in with being a real prospect of winning a future general election, to being a party that can actually govern the country and the trust of people across these aisles. So you're absolutely right. There's no complacency at all here.
Toby, what do you say to the criticism that people aren't voting for Labour and your policies, but are simply voting against the Conservative Party?
Well, I think the fact that there were 11 different people for them to register that vote with on Thursday's election in Wellingborough, and that, you know, we got a very decisive and increased mandate, suggests to me that when they considered all of those options, whether they wanted to go right with reform, or they wanted to vote for the Green Party, for Liberal Democrats, or any of the other ways that they could have registered that protest vote, they chose to vote Labour, and that's what we need people to do. If people want change, they have to vote for it. If your general point is, this government one that don't deserve people's votes, then I think a lot of people in Wellingborough felt that. But we know it requires a lot more than that for us to have a Labour government. It requires people to positively want to vote for us. And I think what was really encouraging in this election is that Jen Kitchen did attract those positive votes. We ran a positive campaign and got a great result as a result of it.
Yeah, but the key line there is people voting for change. We know a lot of people are fed up. But the Prime Minister's quite right, isn't he, when he says we don't know what the Labour Party stands for. Now, I know you want to keep your powder dry until the date is announced and you can get the manifesto out. But we still need even that sense of hope from Keir Starmer, that sort of very positive spin from Keir Starmer that we don't seem to be getting at the moment.
Well, I mean, I disagree with that. There's a huge amount that we've already announced, whether it be the biggest ever investment in green technologies that we announced a week ago, whether it be the changes to our health service has been announced. Actually, what we've seen is that often things that the Labour Party's announced, like the progress on dentistry, the Tories have attempted to nick, because this is a government that's largely run out of ideas. We've got Yvette Cooper's 5-point plan on the stopping the boats and the immigration. There's a huge amount we've already announced. And I think the direction of travel has been laid out by Keir Starmer through the 5 missions, the major sort of principles of a future Labour government. So I think the background exists. I think many of the policies already exist, but there will be a lot more to come out in a manifesto. And the fact that we've had such great results this week shows that people do like the direction the Labour Party is heading in, and they are going to want to see more, and they will see more when we get to a general election.
Toby, it was a very low turnout in the 30% mark, which happens with by-elections. We understand that. But the one thing people would say they do know about the Labour Party is that you have a policy and then Keir Starmer will flip-flop on it. I mean, you mentioned the Green policies just now, the £28 billion pledge, which is now more of an ambition than a target.
So, I mean, the first thing to say is that on the turnout, it was 37% in Kingswood, 38% in Wellingborough. These are absolutely ordinary by-election turnouts. It wasn't particularly a low turnout. It's the case that there will be people who only vote in general elections. But these turnouts were pretty standard by-election turnouts. In terms of the environment pledge, actually, the feedback we were getting on the doors in Wellingborough is people thought it was really reassuring that you've got a government that said, look, we have a very ambitious plan here on the environment. We've now seen the government get the nation's finances into such an appalling state that that's not going to be affordable immediately. So let's tell you right now, right up front, this is what we are going to be able to afford. It's still the most ambitious environmental package that there's ever been, but nonetheless not as big as we hoped it was going to be. I'd much rather us do that now than get into government on a false prospectus and let people down.
We're out of time. It's been good to see you. I've just got to ask you, I noticed your scarf behind you. Chesterfield taking on Bromley today, I think, in the National League. Are you going to be watching?
I won't be watching. It's, I'm afraid, too far away from me, and I've got a small girl's birthday to attend, his birthday, but I will be keeping a close eye on that score as the Sparrows march towards the promotion that we've all been desperately waiting for.
Well, best of luck to you. Toby Perkins, good to see you.
Thank you. Now, can plastic surgery be medically beneficial? That's coming up next. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Dawn.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
I appreciate the story isn't in today's papers, but it has been running all week, and it's this row over the use of nitrogen hypoxia to kill this man who was on death row in Alabama.
Yeah.
And it's been linked back to you, and I wanted to ask you about it because this is intriguing, because you did a television show back in 2015 where you, I believe, tested this method of execution. Just tell me briefly about it, Michael. What happened?
I didn't test this method of execution, and it was a bit longer ago than that. But what I did do was test hypoxia. So I tested various ways in which people are killed in the United States, and asked the question as to whether there was a more humane way of doing it. So I was put into hypoxic situations, for example, into a chamber run by the Netherlands Air Force, which simulated what happens if you're in an aircraft at 30,000 feet and suddenly the windows blow out. And what happened to me was that I was almost instantly rendered incapable. As an experiment, I was trying to play with children's toys, putting triangle shapes into triangle spaces, and I was quickly unable to do that. I was asked, what is 9 minus 5? And I said 5. And then the officer who was with me, the Air Force officer who was wearing an oxygen mask, said to me, Michael, put your mask on or you will die. And I was incapable of putting my own mask on. Now, this suggested that hypoxia was very fast acting.
Yeah.
And that you had... Obviously, I was in no pain or anything like that. I was just completely unaware. By the way, this is why, if you're on an aircraft and it depressurizes, you must put your own mask on first. But of course, I can't go on and draw conclusions.
No.
We did not experiment with nitrogen. But what I can say is it was evident to me that hypoxia renders you incapable almost instantaneously.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, the husband of the glamour model Linda Lusardi wants to remind people that plastic surgery isn't just an aesthetic procedure, but can be undertaken for medical reasons.
Sam Kane says extended periods of stress had caused his eyelids to become really heavy, resulting in headaches. He chose to have them reduced in order to combat the problem.
Well, Sam joins us now alongside plastic surgeon Alex Karidis. Good to see you both this morning.
Welcome both.
Thank you.
So, Sam, what was going on? What's happened?
Well, there was a whole list of reasons. First of all, I mean, you look yourself in the mirror and all of a sudden you realise that the ageing process is happening, gravity's doing its thing, and then COVID happened. And I think there was a lot of stress over that period with the health, also a few personal things. And then you look at yourself in the mirror and there was a drastic change over 2 or 3 years. Now, whether that was just gravity or ageing, it had a massive effect. And my eyelids were dropping down so much that they were dropping onto my eyelashes. And I was doing this all the time just to see. So the headaches were constant. Didn't know what they were about. Went to see the doctor and he said, part of it is the fact that you're pulling this expression all the time. So I looked around, looked for a surgeon who would do a job that was not obvious. And Alex was the perfect choice for me.
You had a very particularly horrible time during COVID with Linda being very, very poorly, didn't you? So the stress of that was understandable. Yeah. So, I mean, Alex, what made you take on Sam's case? What made you think this is one that I'm going to do?
Well, obviously, doing a physical examination, it was clearly obvious to me that he had quite heavy upper eyelids. And they were, as Sam says, they were actually touching on his eyelashes. And when that happens, you get all sorts of effects. Patient feels this heaviness. They're constantly trying to battle this by raising their eyebrows. And, of course, you then activate other muscles, which can cause a heaviness and lead to some headaches, possibly, for some people. So, yes, I totally sympathise with what he was saying.
I mean, the problem we have with plastic surgery, the name doesn't help. For a kick-off, does it? But we have this very much a perception now that people are desperately trying to beat ageing or, in fact, just turn themselves into something that doesn't look quite human anymore, which you get with increasingly with younger people. So, I mean, generally, forget it hadn't actually occurred to me, I've got to be honest, that it was sometimes used for what actually were medical problems.
Yes. I mean, it's not medical in the traditional sense, like you're treating a cancer, but, you're treating other implications of the effects of some sort of problem. In Sam's case, obviously, the heaviness, which lead to other issues, which, of course, at the end of the day, can impact on our mental health in terms of self-esteem, our confidence, how we see ourselves, how we act on a daily basis. All these things can affect people. So, if you identify the issues and you feel that maybe something that could be done surgically could improve this and get rid of this aspect. I'm not saying it's going to save your life, but it's just going to change that aspect of you.
Well, it changes your life, doesn't it?
It does. It
changes your life dramatically because, I mean, just looking at myself in the mirror now, having photographs taken, I mean, to say that vanity isn't a part of this would be a lie. Of course it is. You look at yourself in the mirror. And I'm in show business. I've been in show business for 35, nearly 40 years. So you're used to looking at your own face and seeing a face that is younger in most cases. When you send the photographs out, they're never of today, really, are they?
No, but the issue with you is that you wouldn't know. A lot of people have surgery and you can tell they've had surgery. Now, of course, with you and what you've had done, you wouldn't know.
Well, that was the
you've done it for you.
Yeah. Well, it's given me a massive amount of self-esteem that I'd lost because I really wasn't happy with what was looking back in the mirror. So the vanity is part of it, but also with that comes, a downside, doesn't it? Because you're not really happy with yourself. That exacerbates the mental state and the mental health side of things, and it's really helped.
And I think people always underestimate what cosmetic, plastic, aesthetic surgery involves. So was it quite a painful process? Was recovery quite hard work?
Absolutely the opposite. I cannot stress enough, and I swear that there was no pain. What Alex did and his team was just incredible. I was expecting somewhere from a scale of 1 to 10, about 6 being the pain barrier. There was 0. there was mild discomfort for a few hours. That was it.
Wow.
What do you do, Alex, in terms of... You must have people who come to you, well, with legitimate issues or things that can be done. But what about when you do get these people who say, you know, I just need bigger boobs, or I want to be, you know, pulled and stretched in a way that actually isn't natural?
Yeah. Well, obviously, I have a frank discussion to try to understand the reasons behind having surgery. And
do you ever say no?
Oh, of course, absolutely. For many reasons. I mean, either because I feel that you know the issue is not severe enough for me to do something about, and therefore it's not worthwhile for them, or I feel their expectations are far beyond what anybody can achieve for them, and that's really important. It's the hardest part of our job is living up to patients' expectations. So we have to be very careful about the patients that we choose to offer this surgery.
And Alex, how do you feel that now so many, I mean, I'm talking young women, very young women, and increasingly many of young men in their early 20s, now have taken to going to places like Turkey for procedures, and we have heard of a case of people losing their lives.
Yes. Well, personally, I don't think that's a good idea, because surgery is just one aspect of it, but it's the whole support around the surgery that needs to be in place. And my worry is that people go somewhere abroad, they have the surgery, then they go to get on a plane, come back again, then some problem happens. You know, somebody's not right. There's no aftercare, no support. You know, they're left in the lurch. So I don't think that's a very good way of dealing with this.
Yeah. And if I may, what Alex provides as well, which it blew me away, was almost it's a therapy that goes along with it. So he has a psychologist and a therapist that sits and talks to you about, you know, pre and post operation, and I just thought that was genius.
Well,
to be fair,
does it tempt you to have any more? And I wonder, because being married to Linda must apply some pressure when your wife is that glamorous.
I got over being second fiddle a long time ago. What she sees in me, God knows, but I'm just not going to go there. So I'm happy where I am.
Charming personality.
Oh, bless you, Dawn. Thank you so much.
Well, really good to see you both.
Good to see you too. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Make Sam Kane blush, then you're doing something right. I say.
Has that effect on men, evidently?
Now, the number of people buying vinyl records is on the rise. We'll tell you why in just a moment.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Francis, Just Stop Oil have in the past broken the law. I remember distinctly the Dartford crossing. That ended up with 2 jailed, I believe, if I remember correctly. Is it ever justified in your view?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I mean, I would have to say yes. I mean, we're trying to preserve my life, your lives, the lives of your family, and it's not just the planet that we're trying to protect, it's the lives of millions of people. And, you know, we know from history that we have to break the law in order to put pressure on the government and to be listened to. No one would doubt your sincerity in your views. You genuinely believe in what you fight for. But there are others who think differently. For example, there are Islamist extremists who believe that people will go to hell unless they convert to Islam. They will sincerely, perhaps, break the law in order to force people to convert. In their view, they might be saving people's lives for eternity. There might be abortion activists who say that babies are being murdered and to save their lives we need to break the law to stop people having abortions. Why do you get to say that your moral conviction is the one that's right and other people's individual moral conviction are those that are wrong? So what's really integral to the Just Stop Oil campaign is the fact that it is a non-violent campaign. That's what separates us from the examples that you've just given. We're absolutely dedicated non-violence, both as a tactic and as a principle. So though we might be breaking the law... If individuals take it upon themselves to break the law for whatever their course is, surely the way that we decide what society wants in general is democratic and within the law. Well, of course, we know also that protest is absolutely integral to maintaining and upholding a democracy, and in particular, non-violent protest. I mean, I really can't express to you how severe this situation is, and I'm sure you know this.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you're under a certain age, you won't know what that is. For a kick-off, probably a 7-inch. There's no albums are being sort of popular-ish at the minute, but 7 inches?
Yeah, I always preferred the 12 inches, to be honest with you.
Look at that. I used to go out and buy the singles.
And picture discs.
Picture
you used
discs.
to like picture discs?
I did. I had a Halo James picture disc. I had a single, Wanted.
Yeah.
There's a picture disc. Oh, all that sort of stuff. Text me back. Anyway.
We are tripping down memory lane.
We are. And this is all because the British phonographic industry has revealed that vinyl sales in the UK have hit their highest level since I was buying them back in 1990.
I think actually the husband's personally responsible for this one. Our Taylor Swift's 1989 Taylor's version was the best-selling vinyl, closely followed by the Rolling Stones. I've got this, Hackney Diamonds.
All right, well, let's talk to CEO of One Media, Michael Infante, who's here. Morning. What is going on, particularly with these? I mean, obviously, these are all brand new, but they're all old. I mean, look, Mungo Jerry and all this sort of thing.
Wow.
I mean, so the back catalogue's a big thing now, is it?
It is. And, of course, what's happening now, more and more so, is that having some physical medium, having something that's tangible that you can hold in your hands.
Oh, I'm being told that your mic isn't on, Michael. Where is it? Is it in your pocket? Let me... We haven't switched you... There you go, we haven't switched you on. There we go, how's that? That's got to be better. So
there we are.
There you go, off you go.
Talking about sound.
Turned on.
Well, this is it.
The reason for some of the resurgence, and we've seen £177 million worth of vinyl being sold in the UK in 2023. Right. This is from the hiatus originally of 1990 you just mentioned. Part and package of the reason that product like this is beginning to come back onto the streets as retrospective content is because it's physical, it's tangible. You can't do the same with an MP3, you can't do the same with a digital download. Do these records ever get played? That's one thing. Maybe they end up like a lot of toys and collectibles, you know, not being opened, keeping their preservation of their actual product. But the interesting thing, limited numbers are being made. The forecast at the moment, globally at the moment, $1.87 billion of dollars worth of record sales on physical during 2023. Forecast for 2030, $3.8 billion. So it's a format that isn't going to come back. You're not going to suddenly see Tesla putting record players in cars, kids walking around with record players and, you know, through headphones. It is a collectible, it's something tangible, which you don't get.
But, Michael, it's not just, older people like us, is it?
No.
That are into collecting their vinyl now. Youngsters are really getting involved. If you go to a record shop these days, it's full of kids in their 20s buying armfuls of vinyl.
Record Store Day, which is organised once a year, has really helped promote. We've seen probably an extra 30 record stores opening through the UK, which, let's face it, they were all closing down during, well, from the 1990s right the way through. They're used for promotion. We have our little Edwin Starr's brother Angelo Starr's Christmas record here. Only 1,000 of these were pressed, white label, sent to all the record stations as a promotion. It grabs the DJ's attention, then hopefully they get through. We're actually a digital label. We're using this as promotion. We are now looking at it as becoming potentially a commercial angle as record sales start to grow.
But that's an interesting thing then. For companies like yours, it's not a case of saying, your vinyl aficionados say, well, the only way is vinyl. You're saying you've actually got to make a hybrid of it.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, the convenience of anything digital is always going to be the format of the future. The idea of a collectible, having something physical in your hands, something you'll have on your record station, something you'll have on your hi-fi. I mean, I go back to the days when you used to have a stack of hi-fi records in the corner and a great big amplifier that you sat and played with. You were judged by the size of your speakers, not just your 7 and your 12-inch.
Still are, love, yes, indeed. And how much money are collectible vinyl going for?
Typical retail prices of new product that's coming out, such as this, is somewhere between £25 and £30. So that's a lot of money, though, isn't it? Well, you say it's a lot of money. We did some research, and in 1970, when our good friend Mungo Jerry would have launched in the summertime, an album back in those days would have cost you £1.16 shillings. So the equivalent of £1.80 today.
Yeah.
The average wage at that point was £32 a week for a...
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So now if you talk about the average wage being circa £450 a week, something like that as national, 25, 30 quid, they've kept pace.
Yeah.
Whereas a stream, and if we talk about streaming, you pay a subscription, $10.99 for your typical Spotify subscription. Last year, 170, 180 billion streams. You know, the value to the artists, that becomes another whole big argument, and I promise you another seminar for another show.
Wow.
Look, Michael, it's really good to see you this morning.
Thank you for having me on.
Fascinating.
Oh, right. Well, look, coming up for you at 10 o'clock, it's Saturday morning with Peter and Ellie. Morning, you two. What have you got for us today?
Morning. Morning, you two. Yeah, we've got an absolutely packed show, haven't we? Of course, we're going to be taking you through all of the top news stories of the day, including Navalny. We're going to be analysing that sad news, but we've also got lots of fun for you, you'll be glad to know. It is a Saturday, after all. We're going to be talking about the tooth fairy. Did you know that apparently there are some children now in this country receiving £100 and designer jewellery?
£100?
When their tooth falls out. Yeah, what happened to £1 under the pillowcase?
Well, even £2 is 100% inflation,
Exactly.
just saying.
Exactly.
OK, we're going to be talking about Prince Harry. Should he be welcomed back? Because he's saying he will have a minor role to help his dad. And also, my friend Rosemary Schrager, I love her, the chef, the wonderful lady, is going to be on the show. But is she going to cook for us?
Is she going to cook? I hope so. And her new book as well. She's going to be talking about that. It's going to be amazing. Don't miss it, 10 till 12.
Lovely stuff for you
Sounds
two.
brilliant.
You've always got food going on.
I know, they've always got food. We don't have any food. We've got barely a cup of tea.
No, I know. Fiona on the pay-as-you-eat weddings says it's not acceptable asking people to pay to celebrate your wedding with you. Stephen says I wouldn't ask my friends. Anne and Paddy said we married 39 years ago, didn't have a lot of money, so had a low-key wedding, 20 guests, buffet breakfast in the church hall. There you go, we're still very happily married.
Exactly that,
That's
and
what
that's
matters.
the point. Love.
Isn't it just?
Indeed.
It beats it all. Apart from the weather, here's Annie.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. There will be some heavy rain through this afternoon and the evening, but there will also be some dry spells this weekend, and it is staying very mild. So it is a mild start out there. There is some mist and fog across eastern areas. That should lift and clear to leave some sunshine across eastern areas, particularly through today. It should stay largely dry through much of the morning and into the afternoon here as well. However, across the west, we'll see drizzly rain, particularly across the coast and the hills, and then some quite heavy rain arriving later on into parts of Northern Ireland and parts of West Wales and Western Scotland as well. But it will be feeling very mild once again, particularly in any of the sunshine in the east. As that band of very heavy rain pushes eastwards, we will see some disruption to travel, some difficult driving conditions. So there is a weather warning in force for many areas of England and Wales, and that will push into the southeast by Sunday morning, leaving a much drier start behind it elsewhere in the country. However, there is some uncertainty with how quickly this rain will clear, so I would prepare for a bit of rain in the south and east to start on Sunday. Elsewhere, though, it will be a much drier picture by the morning, away from some heavier showers floating around across northern Scotland. So many areas will see sunny spells through the course of Sunday, fairly